All right, we are live with Josh O'Brien, the Reformed Reader.
How are you?
I am doing pretty good. It's a Monday, but other than that, it was
Yeah,
supposed to rain today and it didn't happen. So I will take it.
Alabama. It's always rain. It rained here this morning and last night, so I'm not.
Ah,
Yeah. This the weather is just. We have a local weatherman that says that Alabama has two tornado seasons, and the first is from April to August, and the second is from September to March. And
it
so,
sounds about right. Yeah, I think my folks moved to Arkansas, and
okay,
so I think they were kind of doing the same thing. They had some
yeah.
stuff down in their area the other day. Nebraska, we don't get them that much, but we do get blizzards and stuff. So
Mm.
you
Mom,
give a little, you take a little.
my mom found out that my mom's adopted, and she found out a few years ago that she has some family out there, and she just went out there I think last year, and so she's itching for us to go out there with her for a family reunion, which is going to be extremely uncomfortable because we don't know any of those people. But we're like, yeah, we're game.
Well, I mean, luckily you do stuff like this, so you're used to just like talking to people.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like I don't know about you, but I've had a few authors on and stuff. It's like I have not met this person before, so hopefully this is going to go well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so much more comfortable, and I love talking to individuals. And so trying to like change gears and start talking to a camera I was like, I hate this, because there's no interaction. There's no feedback. You can't tell the look on somebody's face when you say something ignorant.
Oh,
So you're
fair.
just like, I'm just going to go with it, I guess.
Although the plus side is that you do get to if you're just doing you're doing yourself on a video, you
Yeah,
can go back and edit it.
that's right. That's
Unlike
right.
this, which is a live stream. So if I say something stupid, it's just out there.
Likewise. Yeah. Yeah. I've been worried because we actually did, me and Brian over at Adventures in Literature. What's going on, Brian? Me, him and, Ted over at Ted Red Instead. We were going to do a live stream, and then YouTube wouldn't let me for whatever reason. So we recorded it, and I was like, well, at least with recording it, if I say something dumb, I can delete it. I can trim this down a little bit.
I do have to say I love doing live streams just because of the being able to go back and forth and chat and
Mm,
talk and stuff like that. But I also notice when I get to actually go back and like edit a video that I can catch how many times I say like
and
and or so or I found like I said, I think that's my filler word. Like I
I told
said, whether I said it before or
What's
not.
going on, Josh? Yeah, my wife, because like when I edit I've got an older laptop, so when I edit, if I plug headphones or something in to edit, it lags, and so I have to edit with the speakers on my computer. And I looked over at my wife and I said, I say and things like that so many times. She goes, "Oh, that's not all. You also say," and then she just had a
Yeah.
list, and I'm like, "Okay, hold on." So now I can't unhear it.
Yeah, definitely. I think I taught myself out of that one, but I realized I've just used different filler words instead. But so, opening question, I ask this of everybody. Obviously, your channel up until about a year ago, I think, was
Mhm.
mainly sermons, things like
Yeah,
that. And then about 2 to 3 months ago, you switched over and started doing the book stuff.
yeah.
So, when it comes to BookTube, what is your supervillain origin story?
Ooh, that's a very good question. So I, like everybody else that has a YouTube channel, I started one, not as far as posting videos, just so that way I could save things and those types of things. And then I started teaching a Sunday school class at my local church, and it was around the time of lockdown, and so we were providing online services, but we weren't providing online Sunday school for those individuals. And so I just was like, why are we not doing that? And the answer was we didn't have an answer. And so I said, well, I'm going to start doing it. And so I just started putting them out there in the ether, which is terrifying, because I've got so many people out there that from so many, I mean, if I tell somebody, well, I'm a Christian, that could mean a myriad of things. And so then I have to kind of navigate. I'm like, all right, this is meant for our church. And then it went from that to, we had planted a church, and then so we needed a place to kind of post sermons and send them to people for live streams and stuff. And I'm like, I guess we can just use this. And then I was just too lazy to start another channel because I didn't want to add another email. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna I'm just going to start posting videos, and then rather than hide those, I'm going to leave those up because maybe somebody will get something out of it. But as far as this goes, really, John Minton Talking Story was a big catalyst, I guess. He probably was the catalyst, because when he started the town squares, we have a local radio guy that I listen to just about every morning, and he has this rule. He says, listen, if you're going to call into the show, it needs to be entertaining or informative or some combination of the two. And if it's not either one of those, then don't call, because nobody wants to hear what you have to say. And I was like, so I tried to take that and run with it with the town squares, because at the time I'm like, I'm not going to do that, because I'm not going to be giving anything new to the audience that they couldn't get from somebody that has a way better quality and is well more versed and articulate in their speech, like Mike and John and those guys. And then so I decided to do the inappropriate times for a book recommendation, because I was like, well, I can do a book recommendation in under 60 seconds what most people would consider an inappropriate time, and add a little bit of humor, and maybe somebody will pick up a book that I enjoyed. And then I just started, I was like, well, I'm going to see how ridiculous I can get with some of these. And then I actually had a conversation with John, and he encouraged me. He was one of many, but he encouraged me. He's like, man, there's not really a channel out here that I know of that is basing their reviews on like a personal conviction type thing. And I'd already been kind of talking to some of my friends and brothers at church that I'd been reading some books, and I'm like, I hate having to put one down. And I wished overall that there was somebody out there that was giving us content warnings. And I've said this in a couple of videos, but there's a website called Common Sense Media. And I don't know if people who are watching know what that is, but I believe it's a Christian organization. But what they do is they take movies, TV shows, those types of things, and they will have somebody view those, review them, and then they will let you know what kind of content is in there, whether it be language or sexually explicit content, those types of things. And then they'll rate them on a scale. And then they don't say you should or you shouldn't read this or watch this TV show or movie. What they say is, here's the information, and then you decide for your family what is permissible to you guys. And so I was like, man, if we had that for books, I would have loved that 4 or 5 years ago when I first started picking books up. And so, I was just like, I was talking to some of my friends and very close friends, and they go, yeah, you should just do that. And I was like, dude, I'm such a slow reader. I might reading 4 books a month for me is like a marathon. So, I was like, I just don't know if I have, the knowledge or the capacity to do so. And they're like, I mean, what if you put one out a month? And I'm like, okay. And then I just kind of enjoy editing. I know that's the part most people hate, but I've learned to enjoy the editing process and then being creative in that way. And so, yeah, I guess, here we are starting to post videos about nerdy dragon books. That's what my friends said. They're like, I can't believe there's other people that read that stuff. I'm like, yeah, there's quite a few.
Well, you actually segued into 2 questions that was already in my list, so that's going to be perfect. I just don't know which one to go with first. But the one, of course, you talked about the inappropriate times for a book review.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask you about that. I'm not going to ask you if you have your pants on, but I was going to ask you, now that Town Square is gone, are we going to see any of those on your channel?
I think so. I kind of wanted to not really take a break, but I just kind of wanted to do something a little more refreshing. I didn't want to do something that the people that kind of knew me already expected. Plus, I know how I can get, and that I can take things too far very quickly. And so I'm like, let's come up with some inappropriate times for a book recommendation that aren't legitimately inappropriate, and it's just inappropriate for a book recommendation, And so when I was talking to John, he actually brought that up, and I said, well, just, I hate to ruin the mystery, but I actually had pants on in that video. And he said, well, my wife, she sat there and she paused it and she zoomed it in. And I was like, well, what is that? Hold up. Like that's looking a little too close.
Yeah, but first of all, why?
But he got a kick out of it. And I was just sitting there thinking, every time I would come up with one of those, I would kind of run it by my wife. I'm like, would you think this was humorous if it was 30 seconds? And then so it started with, okay, it would be funny if I did this. And then what if I did this? Okay, what if we flip that on its head and subverted expectations, and then, got the big laugh or whatever, the cheap laughs, really what it is at the end. But yeah, I think so. But for the past, I'd say month and a half, I've been doing 3 videos a week. And I'd said, I think maybe last month, that I would dial it back to 2 if I thought maybe it was too much of a workload for me with all the other stuff that I've got going on. And it kind of seems like maybe that's the case. And also, I think for the most part, the people that watch my videos tend to kind of like the 2 videos a week. Some people have said, oh, put as many out as possible. I'm like, yeah, but the analytics show that actually more people tune in, not just more, but longer for 2 videos a week rather than 3. And plus, because I'm such a slow reader, my backlog of books that I can review is going to run short very quickly. And so I think what I'm going to do moving forward would be 2 videos a week, and then maybe a short. So I'll post on Sunday and Wednesday, and then maybe do a short on Friday. And that could be one of a few things. I've been doing the today's rapid reviews, and those are fun because I don't qualify anything. I'm like, hey, this is good. Hey, this is trash. And then that's it, Yeah, and so I think I'm either going to do, try to start kind of subbing some of those inappropriate times for book recommendations in, maybe monthly as well. But I think if I do them too frequently, I'll get out of hand.
Yeah, no, I get that too. I mean, plus it's too easy to run out of ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I threw it up there, but you're in the middle of a conversation, so I just want to say hi to Sam while we're there.
Sam Wise, what's going on, my friend? It's good, brother.
All right. And the other thing that you thought of, I hadn't heard of Common Sense, but I don't know. Are you familiar with dove.org?
Yes.
So yeah, that's the one that I thought of when I was watching your channel. Was the fact that, and I love the fact that back in the day, for a while there, they were reviewing everything. And then after that, they even came back and said, we feel bad sending our people to watch movies that we absolutely know we aren't going to be able to recommend in the first place. So like, I highly doubt that dove.org sent anybody to, watch Deadpool 3. They just
right.
We just already know this is not going to be appropriate.
Yeah. So there are 2. The Common Sense is one, and then Common Sense Media tends to limit the amount of clicks or the amount of reviews that you can see before you pay a subscription. And so I think you get so many a month. And so I just cycle between it. And there's another one called Plugged In Media, and it's very similar.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that one.
Yeah, I like it, but it's not as detailed. It's not as structured. It's just kind of like, this was our overall feeling on it. And, it does the job, I guess, as far as if I'm trying to vet something for me or my kids to watch. But for they kind of, the Plugged In, they kind of do follow a similar trend where it's, we're not going to review every episode of Game of Thrones. Whereas Common Sense, they do, oh, that's a great, that is a great idea, Sam. I'm stealing it. But yeah, they're not going to review, Plugged In isn't going to review the episodes of Game of Thrones, but Common Sense will. So anything that's fairly popular, they're going to have a team that sits down and they'll go through and show you what second mark, any kind of, not just swear word, but even like a filth word, like poop or something as silly as that. They're like, there's some families that just don't want to even hear that. And so just be forewarned. Whereas Plugged In, they tend to kind of, I don't want to say they try to convince you, but they definitely try to set, they lean more into the, maybe you should, or maybe you shouldn't, or we would or wouldn't recommend this to a Christian. Whereas Common Sense Media is just like, here's the facts, do what you want to with them.
And I think that's fair though, because I think you probably there's both types of viewerships.
Yeah.
There's the ones that are like, give me the facts. I'm a big boy. I'll make my own decisions. And there's other ones just like, just tell me whether I want to go see this or not.
Right. Well, so Sam over Sam Wise, which his channel's awesome, but he's actually the one that had me kind of change my format or rethink my format, because my wife had mentioned it to me, and I try to, when I post things, I don't like going back and watching them, but I have to when I edit them. And so I try to be as objective as possible with them. And I'm like, did I say something that sounded, am I going to lead somebody down a path that I'm not trying to go down or whatever? And so Sam actually was the one that brought up, he said, he didn't say, why don't you? He just said, I prefer, or something along those lines. He can correct me down in the comments, but it was he likes the common sense media format better, where it's here's the information and then do what you want to with it, rather than, we would recommend you do or do not watch this. And my first couple of months of reviews, that's the way I was aiming my reviews. That I actually titled them, should Christians read, and then insert title. And then just over the past few weeks, or since a few weeks ago, I just rethought it. And I'm like, I'm not the authority to say that. And so rather than say, should somebody read it, because the word should, we know, means ought, which carries like a moral obligation to it. And so rather than saying you ought to or ought not, I'm just saying a Christian reads. And so that way I can say, look, this is my perspective. This is how I read the book. This is how my enjoyment was, or lack of. And these were some of the issues I had, or these were some of the things I loved. And then here's the information, and then do what you want to with it. Because like you said, you're adults, you can figure it out. I don't need to tell you what you should or shouldn't allow in your home. I can only tell you what I do or don't allow in mine, and then let you make up your own mind with those things.
It's just kind of like a mature label.
Yeah.
We let you know it was mature. After that, it's up to you.
Right. And while my format changed a little bit, it was really more of like the title. And I understood that I made those titles of should a Christian read, that they were kind of inflammatory, maybe not inflammatory, but they're I guess inflammatory is a little bit, because then it would get somebody to go, let's see what he has to say. Right. Whereas if I just say a Christian reads, it does change the tone of the video without me doing anything. Passive. Yes. And so, but at the end of all of my reviews, I do always say, or ask the question, would I recommend it to a Christian? And most of the time it comes down to, it just depends, because it really depends on an individualistic level. It's like, I go to church with, not that our church that we attend right now is not large. I mean, I think we have maybe 50 to 60 people that attend. And that's not members. Those are just people that show up. And in that group, there could be people that watch the most extreme movies, and then the people who are most conservative, and there's sort of a blend of everything in between. And so if I say, well, would I recommend this to a Christian? Most of the time, the real answer would be, it just depends on who it is. It's like, I might recommend something to Sam or to you that I wouldn't recommend to Brian over at Adventures in Literature. And that's just because of what I know of certain people's preferences or tolerance levels of certain things. And then, even then I most of the time, like you said, I would give some sort of like, maybe not a warning, but it's just like, hey, before you dive into this, I just wanted to let you know that these things are in this book. And so that way you're not surprised when you get to it, because what I would hate to do is say, you should read this, and then they get to something that they have a moral conviction over, or something they're wrestling with, and they're like, I don't know that I should be entertained by this, but then I'm the guy that said you should read this, so I'm just like, it's those disclaimers. That's the word I'm looking for. I probably have to give a disclaimer to most of the books that I recommend as of right now. But I mean, I think that's the case with anything. If I'm recommending it to a Christian. Now that's always the little caveat at the end, is like, if it's a Christian, because if it's a non-Christian, then it's a completely different story. But if I'm recommending it to somebody that is actively trying to avoid certain sin, as far as what we understand the scriptures tell us is sinful, and it just depends on, like, tell me some of the things you like. And that's for the most part has been some good friends of mine. I'll kind of get some feedback from them before I recommend a book to them. So if they're like, hey, like, what would you recommend I start with in fantasy? And I just say, what movies do you like? What TV shows do you like? And so then I can kind of start piecing things together, and I realize maybe what they're their rating is. Like, can they read rated R stuff, or do they stick to PG or PG-13, or are they just like, I can only read Pilgrim's Progress and Narnia and that's it, and so there's everything in between. And so there's a lot of that, which is why it's difficult, or I say difficult, why it's just, I just have to learn to navigate that through the camera without talking to somebody,
And I think that's probably the hardest part, is the fact that you
Yeah.
don't know everybody that you're
Right.
making quote unquote recommendations for.
Right.
I mean, I know for a fact, and I don't think she'll yell at me, but if I read a 600-page book and on page 599 is an F-bomb, I still can't give that book to my mother. She will smack me with it.
Right. And then the context of even those types of things is more important, or at least equally as important as what's the content itself. So I've used this example too many times, and I will continue to, but because it works. But like for language, so I break those, the ugly section, the things that are sinful, down into different categories. One of them is language. And if I were to take a film, because it's a lot easier, but if I were to take a film like Saving Private Ryan, and I was to rate that on a scale of 10 on language, it's like a 9 or a 10.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't recommend the movie. Whereas you look at a movie like Pulp Fiction, it might even be a little bit less. If you're actually counting the times that certain words are uttered, then, Pulp Fiction probably is actually less severe than Saving Private Ryan. But the context makes the world of difference, because, if the guys are storming the beaches at Normandy and a guy's getting shot at and he goes, "Oh, dang," that's going to pull me out of it. Now, I'm not saying like, I can't wait to hear those swears and things like, that's not it either. But I do want, if I'm watching something like that, I do want it to be as realistic as possible, which I know is what the artist, the director, the writer, or whoever is trying to convey to his audience. Whereas I look at something like Pulp Fiction, and while again, the art is still there, it's like, okay, is this gratuitous, or are they throwing these around for the sake of just being inflammatory or being edgy? And if that's the case, then that makes me kind of dial back a little bit. Or even, I would recommend Saving Private Ryan to somebody, depending on who it is, but I wouldn't recommend Pulp Fiction to a Christian, And so it's just like, even though one is more severe than the other, the context really matters. And then you do have to look into, particularly with novels, you do have to look into the intent of the author. And there's been quite a bit of debate. None of my videos have ever sparked argument, which I cannot believe. And I'm super grateful for, because the audience has just been awesome. And they have just asked genuine questions, or they may even have objections to things. And I hope they do, so we can converse, because that's what I'm here for. I want to have those meaningful conversations with people. But the intent of the author is very important to me. And so, if there's murder in a book, and some people have said, well, how come that you can condone or maybe give a pass to certain quote unquote sinful behavior, but not others? And well, there's a ton of reasons. One of them could be that not all of them are created equally. Some are more severe, and some things I'm just personally probably a little less in tune to notice, and then I may not be as affronting to me. And so what I mean is, I could read a John Gwynne book and it's full of just people slaughtering each other, and it's descriptive, but it's battle. Whereas, that doesn't really bother me, because I understand the context is it's Vikings battling one another. Like, that's why I'm reading it. But if I read something where there's, a child being assaulted in numerous ways, I pump the brakes. And they're like, well, that's not even as descriptive or explicit as this other thing. I'm like, yeah, but the intent, like, what's the intent of the author here? And that is mildly subjective. But I think with the difference between film and TV, the difference in those media, or in that type of media, and then books, is that every word in a book is intentional. And when an author pins a certain word and he has to go through so many revisions that he or she is most of the time being very intentional about what their language is that they're using and trying to convey a point. And then as the audience, it's up to us at that point to decipher what they're trying to tell us. And so if I know that's a very long-winded way of me saying, like, the intent really, really matters to me. And so if there's like a sexually explicit scene in a book, but it's not gratuitous, or it's for a specific reason, like a plot device to drive the story forward, then, like, obviously I'm going to give that more of a pass than somebody that's just like, oh, hey, let's pause the story for a second and let me tell you about this sexually explicit scene, and then let's go back into the story. It's like, okay, well, you're just adding that for the sake of being inflammatory or being edgy or whatever. And so at that point, that's when it starts to kind of grate on me personally. And so that's those are the types of things that I try to maybe point out a little bit more in my reviews, is because I don't think people come to my reviews to hear me read the summary or to see the pictures I put up there or whatever. I don't think they do. And if they do, thank you. But most of the time people are coming, if they are, to watch my reviews to see those content warnings, those disclaimers of, hey, what's in here? I'm about to purchase this $45 hardback. Is it worth my time? It's 1,800 pages. Am I going to have to put it down at page 1,750 or, and so with that, I try to be as exhaustive as I can with those types of, like, with the explaining the content there. And so then I have to say, here's my opinion on what the intent of the author might have been. I can't say for certain. I can go and listen to interviews, which I've done. I can go and look at Reddit posts, which I've done, and all these different forums, and then piece these things together and say, yeah, it wasn't his intent to do that, or maybe it was, or we just have to kind of chalk it up to we don't know, and then move forward or put it down. So yeah, it is difficult to navigate that and then to convey that to the audience is like, well, here's why I would or wouldn't pick this up. And now you have to just figure out what you're going to do with the information.
Yeah. Well, I mean, two things. One, I think you feel a niche.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's not Christian book reviewers, but I don't think there's a lot, for instance, in the fantasy genre. So you're bringing that to the people who want to read that, but I grew up in a time, where if I had been a young man, I probably wouldn't have been allowed to read Harry Potter, for instance. I was like, there was no Dungeons and Dragons going on in my house. But also I think I like the fact that you use the word gratuitous, and I think another word that goes hand in hand with that is glorified, for instance.
Yes.
To me, and again, we'll get back to the movie. If a guy's storming the beach at Normandy and he gets off the thing and his buddy's head gets blown off, I'm going to be much more forgiving of him dropping an S-bomb
right.
than, somebody who hits their alarm late and then just like says it 15 times going down the hall.
Right. Exactly.
It's like, okay, now you're just saying it because, a bad word. And, and you want to get a certain rating for your movie.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, again, to your point, if somebody getting the head blown off and you got to look over, it's like, golly gee, it's
yeah. Well, okay. So Ted and Brian and I, Saturday when we were talking, I'll be posting a book review that we did a buddy read together, and in there I actually mentioned that I've got several, once people know that I'm a Christian, which most of my friends do or coworkers, and so they'll ask me the stereotypical, like, have you seen this movie, or have you seen Courageous, or have you seen God's Not Dead, or all these movies? And I'm just like, no. And they said, well, why not? And I said, because they're not any good. and they're like, and I'm like, well, here's the deal is I appreciate and respect all of the hard work that these individuals are doing to try to break into the mainstream media of, or with Christian work and with a good message, but that doesn't mean that it has to be a B movie. Like you can I'm not saying you have to have a huge, like a huge budget, but what's going on, Dennis? But at the same time, it's like, we don't have to be corny. You know, if we are Christians and we genuinely believe that, like, we are, according to the scriptures, that we are now adopted as sons and daughters of the Most High God, then shouldn't that be reflective in our work? I just don't think it should be more like D movies. That's right, Brian. I just think that maybe we should put forth that same effort, because normally when somebody hears it's a Christian fill in the blank, whether it's movie, TV show, song, or whatever, you immediately, like, the bar is lowered just without having to say it, because you're like, okay, well, this is good. Like, and I've heard this several times. Oh, it's really good for a Christian movie, or it's really good for a Christian band. I'm like, why can't it just be a good movie or a good band or a good show? And so in my opinion, it's like, if we can't put forth the same effort and put forth the same type of product as far as quality goes, then maybe we shouldn't do it. It's like, I'm not trying to, like, trash on those movies, but that's just, I didn't grow up in a church. I didn't grow up as a Christian. And so when I was grafted into the church, I immediately, that's right. Oopsies, stepped on a landmine. But because I didn't grow up in a church, I have sort of a litmus test that I gauge some of these things on, which is like, how would I have looked at this as a non-Christian? If we're seeing a skit that a church is putting on or whatever, I mean, you can use whatever example you want to, but if I try to be objective and not critical in that sense, but I do try to be objective and say, okay, if I was somebody that's not kind of already ingrained in the church and I'm seeing this, what would I think? And a lot of times it's, man, this is corny, or man, this is like subpar, And so that's why I've tried to get into some Christian fiction, and it's sort of in the same vein. So some people were like, well, it's just real difficult for Christians to have good quality books and stories. I'm like, Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, you know what I mean? Like, that is completely untrue. And J.K. Rowling, for that matter. I mean, if you go and you look at her biography, like, she is a self-proclaimed Christian. And so I'm like, so three, in my opinion, I listened to your interview with John Minton, and you were asking about the Mount Rushmores, or who would be in your Mount Rushmore. To me, it's Lewis, Tolkien, and Rowling. And I don't know definitively who the fourth would be, but out of those three, automatically, these are people that are people of faith. And so I'm like, you can't tell me that we can't put out a good quality product, because there's evidence that says otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I think too, there's a difference between people that are writing Christian fiction, and Christians writing fiction.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Well, so my favorite example of that is James Allington. So I did not know that he was a Christian, and I didn't know that he was a Reformed Christian, for that matter. And I started reading Licanius. I'd heard a lot about it over with Mike and several of the other guys. And so I'm like, I'm going to pick this up. I've never read like a time loop or time type fantasy story, so I'll pick this up. And I got I think it was about the 60 or 70% mark. And a couple of characters are sitting around a fire, and they start discussing theology, and it's sound. And I'm sitting there going, I'm like, surely this isn't coincidental. And so I'm sitting there, because I normally read with headphones in while my wife is watching TV or she's reading her own book. I got some ambience or something going. And then I stopped and I go, I told my wife, I said, I think this guy's a Christian. And she said, really? Yeah, let me read a little bit more and we'll see. And I got about 30 seconds into it. I go, this guy is like teaching theology in Licanius. Spoiler alert for anybody that doesn't want to read that, but it's sound doctrine in there. And so, again, you have a guy, he's just a Christian. He's not writing Christian fiction. He's just writing fiction, and he's using his experience and his own beliefs to just propel a story that he has. And I'm like, yes, exactly like you said. He's not a Christian author. He's a Christian that's an author. And the same with that radio guy. He's like, look, we're not a Christian radio station. We're Christians who have a radio station. Well, we're not going to back ourselves into a corner and say, well, we're only going to talk about faith-based things because we might talk about whatever. And so Rockio. Yes, Rockio does a similar thing. Yeah, very much so. I haven't read all of book 1, so y'all don't start throwing stones.
Yeah, I've got the first 2 books on my bookshelf. I need to get those at some point too.
Yeah, I went to start it, and then I've had different people from different ends of the spectrum go, you'll like it, you won't, you should read it, you shouldn't. And so I'm like, I'm just gonna wait a little bit, and then I'll read something else. And once I get in the mood, I'll pick it up. But yeah, I think the Christians who are putting forth a product that isn't marketed towards Christians tends to be a higher quality. And it's because it does carry that stigma. I mean, I hate that that's the case, but it just seems like it.
No offense, Sam, but I always hate that advice. It's like people, I gave up I tapped out on The Office after watching a couple episodes. And they were like, you got to get to season 2. It's like, I don't want to have to get through season 1 to get to season 2.
Yeah, we did that with Parks and Rec because we loved The Office, but when we started watching it, we watched it sort of midway through. And then so they're like, oh yeah, Parks and Rec's coming out. It's the same people basically. And we were like, man, this show is not funny. And then season 2, we were hooked. But then, if I'm trying to recommend it to somebody, they're like, you mean I have to watch 20 episodes? I'm like, no, you don't have to watch it at all. But if you want the background, yeah, you're going to have to. Like, no, I'm out. I understand.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, one of the authors I was thinking of, she's not quite as popular. She's local, so she's popular around here. Tosca Lee. She is part of the Christian Writers Association, but you don't read her books, and it's not about Christianity.
Right.
It's not about a Christian in a particular situation. It's just about people, and she just doesn't throw in all the cussing and everything.
Exactly.
So.
That's my wife. She reads she reads exclusively Christian fiction, and tends to be like Christian romance. Not all the Amish ones that you see, but she does love her Christian romance.
It isn't Amish.
That's what I wondered for the longest time, But so she started reading some of these books, and I started picking them up for her, and they're essentially Agatha Christie type murder mysteries, most of the time with a love story kind of in the background. And she just gets hooked on these, and I'm like, wow, like is this just one of those cheesy love stories? She goes, no, it's just a murder mystery. It just doesn't have explicit language or explicit sex scenes and things like that. So I'm just, it's just clean fiction for me to read. And so that's why we try to point some people towards more of that type of thing. But because it's published by the publishing company is Bethany House, and they tend to publish quite a bit of Christian fiction. And so because that's on there, it can be, it's two sides of the same coin. It's good because they've got that repertoire with their audience. And so if somebody sees that logo, like we would see with an Orbit or a Tor, immediately you can reach for it because the quality is probably there. But inversely, I think it does carry that bit of baggage where it's like, okay, well, this is a Christian story. And so that might actually hold some people back from picking it up, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm still really starting to like Tor. They sent me my last 2 arcs, so book mail.
I got a friend of mine that sent me, or he's a subscriber. He emailed me and he said, hey, can I send you a book? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I don't know that I'll get to it because I'm so slow with my reading. And he said, well, I saw that your son loved Aragon, and this is a younger, it's a younger story. It's a YA, and I think he would like it. You don't have to read it. And he sent it to me, and my son has just been absolutely hooked. And so it's the first time that we've been sent something from somebody in the ether, and my son was like, it's just so cool that somebody would send me this and thought of me. And so he just has been flying through it. So that is very cool. I haven't decided if I'm going to try eventually to, get some e-arcs or whatever, because I don't think I'll ever get it finished before the review, or before the release date.
Yeah, I never promised them that I'm actually going to get them read.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, if you
but
want to
hey, you
send me a
can't
free
just drop
copy,
that. What's the name of the book?
I can
Put you
look
on
it
the
up.
spot.
It's a weird, it was a very weird fantasy sounding name. Let me see. It is called, awkward silence. Here we go. And Drago and the, okay, it's not pulling up. I don't know. I'll send it to you.
I would just, since you said somebody sent it to him, I just didn't know if you knew off the top of your head.
Yeah, yeah. It's he picked it up and he's been hooked. And he's at first he was like, "Are you going to read it with me?" And I was like, "Man, I'm already part of 2 buddy reads, and I'm struggling to get those done." And so, and your mom is wanting me to read Count of Monte Cristo with her at the end of the month. And so I was just
Oh, I
like,
love that book.
"Yeah." Well, so I've read the first half of that book twice, and then I've put it down both times, not for any other reason than time or something happens in life.
It is
And
a
I
little
just,
big, if I
yeah,
remember correctly.
I love, and to this point, I think it's been, the last time I picked it up was about 3 years ago, but I remember enough of it, and it's such a memorable story that I could probably pick up where I left off and be fine. But I'm going to start it back over. She wants
Or
me
you
to.
can
So
watch
I'm
the
like,
movie.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Did you see the French one that they put out?
No.
It's she was disappointed because she loves the book so much. It's still good, but it's also still different. You know, it's like
Gotcha.
the Jim Caviezel one. We absolutely love that movie. It is a completely different version of the story, but it's
Little
still
bit, yeah.
fantastic. You know, it's like I understand they had to combine 3 or 4 characters into one, so that there's, you know, I get all that, but I still love the movie. My father-in-law is very big on, like, he's a very, like, very much, he wants to stick to the original, and he's like, why can't somebody just make the original and put it on screen and give it to us, because people will love it. And then we're like, I don't know. They just don't. They don't ever do that with anything.
14-hour movie. That's why.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Although you might get a kick out of this. I remember when I was in high school, we were watching, and I think every high school did it back in the day, but we were watching Romeo and Juliet.
Mm.
You know, English class, like a Friday there. And I didn't realize that we realized about 75% of the way through the movie that one of the people is reading along, because we get through 75% of this movie and all of a sudden we hear, that's not what he said. He's reading the book during the entire movie. Like, okay.
That's awesome.
That whole immersion thing, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably the kid that didn't read it when he was required to, and so he's trying to catch up real quick. You know, I was that kid that when we had required readings, it'd be like, okay, I have 6 months to read this, and then fast forward, it's like, okay, I have 6 hours to read this. You know, got to cram it in.
Yeah, I don't think I always felt like I didn't get assigned enough, but I was one of those kids that loved reading.
I did too, but it had to be something. It had to be something that I was interested in, and so like, I loved Julius Caesar, and I couldn't stand most of Shakespeare. I loved, like, I actually really enjoyed the Scarlet Letter, and I just couldn't connect with Tom Sawyer. And I think part of that was that it was my age and maturity at the time, because I was definitely not mature. I was not a mature middle schooler. You know, I was still like way too attached to kids' cartoons and stuff like that. And then they're trying to send me Tom Sawyer and figure out allegory. And I'm like, okay, this is a kid that's dirty and homeless, right? You know? Yeah. Like, I was just bored.
We were on opposite ends at like 10, 11, 12. That's all I was reading was stuff that'd be considered classics now. Although I also realized that it is a muscle, because I tried going back, and I think it was like I picked up Treasure Island that I remembered loving as a kid. And I start reading through this, and I'm about 5 pages in. I was like, I used to know what half these words meant. It's like,
either that or
a lot of
we had to look them
big
up.
words in that book.
Yeah. Well, so we homeschool our kids, and our son is having to do book reports, and he's like, oh, and he's 11, but you know, I'm like, you're going to have to start looking some stuff up. And so I was telling him he's got a big book report coming at the end of the year. And we told him, like, you can basically pick a book of your choosing that you've read over the year. And cause we're not like, you got to read a couple chapters. It's like, you have to finish Aragon in a week. like get busy. You got plenty of time. And so he's got this big book report coming up, and I told him he's going to have to start looking stuff up and using resources. And he goes, okay, well, I'll just use the iPad. And I'm like, nobody, get ready. You are about to dive into a thesaurus, a dictionary, and all the things that we had to do. There's going to be no smart devices. You didn't love Tom Sawyer. I figured that was basically his childhood. It's probably not too far off, but I didn't love it at the time, but I did purchase it as an adult because I would like to revisit it. And it was more of that when I was reading in school, was the assigned readings. I just didn't, I couldn't connect with them. So I was hate reading. And I don't like to do that. I'm such a mood reader now too, that even the buddy reads that I've agreed to, I've found myself about halfway through them regretting, because I'm such a mood reader that if I'm not in the mood to read the assigned book, and then I'm like, oh, well, now I have to finish it. And I really got this, I've got this other sci-fi book over here that I've been dying to read, and I'm just flying through this so I can get to the next one. And I don't think that's fair to the work or the author. And so that's why most of the time, like, I don't have TBR videos. I don't have a TBR or anything. I just go, I'm going to read what I'm in the mood to read. And then you guys will find out as I start posting videos. We got on my wife and kids, they're rewatching Star Wars right now. And I just needed something I had DNF'd like 4 books in a row. And I just need something that's going to be fun, that I don't have to think about. I don't have to, pick apart and all these things. And so a buddy of mine, he's like, you love Star Wars, read the Darth Maul book. And I sat down with it yesterday, and I'm like 150 pages in it. And I haven't done that in a long time. I just enjoyed it. And so if I get stuck in these, whether I don't want to say stuck, that sounds harsh, but if I agree to these buddy reads, but I'm not in the mood for it, then it definitely tarnishes my overall experience with it. And that's kind of the way it was with Tom Sawyer. It's just like, I want to read this when I want to read it, so that way I'll love it.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like I've hopped out of, there was a couple of, like we talked about the mittens earlier. There was a couple of books that I was going to do the Janny Uary, read along and stuff like that. And then I've had too many other books that I've got to read because I've got an interview coming up or something like that. And I was just like, and then I look at NetGalley and realize how many reviews I owe them. So I was like, I don't know if I can read. I need to get some stuff done so I can get back to some of these just for fun books. Yeah. I was going to ask you, you said you're down in Georgia, right?
Alabama.
It's still close. I think maybe I had Atlanta on the head when you said Alabama. So you guys have Books A Million down there.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think your wife would love that place. I just remember we had one in Omaha for like 3 years, and then it went belly up or whatever because nobody even knew it was here. But I do remember that place that had like the biggest Christian romance section of any major chain I've ever seen. It's like,
it also depends on the location, because so for my work, I work in 7 different counties, and that county could vary day by day. And so for anybody that knows any of the geography of Alabama, I'm pretty close to Huntsville, Rocket City, where Lockheed and all these places are. And so when we go up there, because it's a metropolitan area, that selection is quite diminished. Whereas if I go to one that's in a small town, that's the equivalent in as far as distance goes, it's the majority section. And so I definitely think that they tend to listen to their local market and then buy accordingly, or order accordingly. But I will say Books A Million has a fantastic seconds or discounted section where somebody will return it or it'll get dinged. And so I think I've probably picked up 10 to 15 books in the past year, maybe not even that, I don't think I've paid over $5 a book for it. And they're all hardcover, and there's nothing wrong with them. I'm like, they just, whether it be they're not selling great or they're putting out a new version of it. Like I bought almost the entire series of Wheel of Time because they were phasing out the old covers to bring in the TV show covers. And so I just happened to find them for very cheap, the hardcovers for like $6 a piece. And so I'm trying to get them whenever I get a paycheck, and I picked up almost all of them. And then now they're phasing those out because nobody wants them, and they're moving back to the old covers. I'm like, oh, because I missed is it the Great Hunt, I think is one book 3 or something. It's one of the more popular ones, and it's like a $40 book. And I was like, oh man, if I could have got that for $10.
Yeah, I usually don't like the second covers they always come up
Yeah.
with for places. Although I do have to say, if I was into the Harry Potter series, when they redid them all so that the
Yes.
spines had
Yeah.
its own little picture there, that was kind of cool when they matched
Yeah.
up.
Well, I'm Harry Potter held such a special place in my life because that's what I read and kind of kept me reading as a kid. And it was that world that I could kind of escape to if something was going on, that I have such a special place for those old school covers, because those were the ones that popped for me. Whereas I'm handing them to my son, and we'd go walk in Books A Million or Barnes and Noble, and he's like, those are way cooler than the ones you've got. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, no, they're not, son. Those are way worse. Your opinion is wrong.
The ones that kill me these days, just because I can't afford them, is like the Wraith marked and some of these other guys, Broken Binding. I like some of these editions, like, that is so pretty, but I could buy 20 books for that price.
Yep. That's what, so Broken Binding, I put in, let's see, I'd put in for their, whatever, to wait in line. It was probably 3 years ago. And it was right when I was getting into books. And I'm like, I could probably swing, $25, $30 a month. By the way, didn't realize that shipping was an extra $20 or $30. But at that time I'd put in for it, completely forgot about it. And then I think it was last February or something, they were like, hey, we'd love to invite you to be part of our subscription. And it was at a time where I'm like, okay, this is not reasonable whatsoever for me and my family. And so thankfully there are people and Facebook groups where I'm like, hey, if there's a series that I really love, like the Dragonbone Chair, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, those are so beautiful. And I wanted those. And so I was like, I will keep those. But if anybody wants these other ones, I'll just give them to you at cost. And then I'm not out anything. And then they get, and so it's been a pretty good transaction. The only other Wraith marked can get kind of pricey. And the only one that I was glad that I picked up was the Sword of Kaigan, that really pretty special edition one. But man, it jumped in price so high, and my HVAC unit went out that I sold it. I was like, look, we can either have this pretty book or we can have air conditioning in Alabama summers. And so that's what we're going to do.
All right. We have to behave ourselves, Josh. my mom's in the chat. All right. So yeah, I joined, I think I joined a Lumicrate for like a year because I see like I got my daughter the Neil Shusterman set.
Yeah.
It's just one of our favorite authors and stuff like that. But I keep finding out, and I canceled them after the year was up, because I like the special editions that they come out that are separate.
Yes.
But I don't always necessarily like the ones that drop every month.
Yeah.
And so I've got like a year's worth of what is basically YA books.
Oh, yeah.
That I'm going to read at some point.
You have to at this point. Yeah, that's right.
I am glad I did the book only, though. I didn't do the old, I didn't get all the stuff that comes in the boxes.
Yeah, that's Broken Binding does. Thankfully, they do so they do the series, and so it's like, what you're going to be getting for the next 3, if it's a trilogy, which they tend to kind of stick to, that they do, we'll do a trilogy. So those are the books you're going to be getting for the next 3 months. However, if we mention a series that you don't want, you can do one skip for a series per year. And so there was, I don't remember what the series that's going right now. I'd never heard of it, didn't really have any interest in it. And I'm like, I'm going to skip this one. And so they don't charge you, and you hold your place. And so that's pretty cool of them to do, because I think there's always somebody ready to pick those up.
It's kind of like the old Columbia House. If you remember to click on the "Don't send me these,"
yes. Otherwise they will sue you.
Yeah. What's the one I saw? It's hilarious. There's one I saw. Somebody's being arrested, and they're throwing him the thing, and somebody put up the caption. It's like, "They finally got you for those that 99 cents that you didn't send to Columbia House
the CDs.
Back in 83."
Yeah, you got those 5 CDs, and now your credit's down.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. But hey, I think a lot of us of a certain age, maybe not you, those of us of a certain age, uh, we get a lot of our early fantasy books from Science Fiction Book Club. I'm just saying.
Mm. Yeah, so I didn't grow up with like sci-fi and fantasy really at all. Um, I mean, I was a super nerdy kid. I'm the youngest of three brothers, and so both of my brothers are pretty athletic. They've got they're just like naturally built like athletes. And then my mom, she actually apologized to me a couple of years ago because she was like, "Your brothers have your dad's metabolism, and you've got mine, so you have to watch what you eat for the rest of your life." And so I was always the chubby kid and the nerdy kid. I loved Pokemon way too long, which I know it probably shows my age, but like, Pokemon was like right at my 8 or 9 year old self. And then I kept loving it till I was 13, 14, and everybody else moved into baseball cards. And they're like, "Why are you still collecting these dragons and stuff?" I'm like, "That's way cooler than a pitcher." I'm like, because I want swords and dragons. And so that's sort of where, when we went to the public or to our library at school and we had to pick out a book to read, I mean, I just gravitated towards those covers. And I actually started with Brian Jacques. I don't know if you know him. He does, here's one.
Redwall?
Look at that. Yeah, he does all the Redwall books. And so one of those books, I saw it and I was like, that is so cool. I mean, I love Lord of the Rings. The movies were just coming out, and this is Lord of the Rings with animals. That sounds great. And so I picked it up, and everybody else is reading, Hardy Boys and Boxcar Children. And then I'm over here reading, wizards and dragons and swords. And they're like, what a dork. I'm like, absolutely. But my stories are cool. And, it wasn't to like diminish them, but I actually had a guy my senior year, because I was friends with all the different groups. I didn't have like, I had friends everywhere. I didn't really have many like close friends, but in whatever class I was in, I had friends everywhere. And so, my math class, we had calculus in high school, and a couple friends of mine played all the three big sports, and they came up to me and we're sitting there talking and cutting up, and they go, "Man, we wish we knew you were this cool 5 years ago." And I said, "Yeah, well, it's your loss, because I've always been this cool." And then he actually one of them stopped and looked at me. He goes, "Can I just be dead serious with you for a minute?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And he goes, "Why dragons? Why not baseball or football?" I'm like, "I don't know, man. It was my thing. It was that I could escape into Middle Earth or into Hogwarts, and, I didn't have to worry about what was going on at home or my grades in school, or I didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff because I could dive into this other world." And I think I actually saw a study recently that said that kids who tend to have a more difficult childhood at home or in school normally tend to gravitate towards science fiction and fantasy books, or the music. Actually, those tend to be the kids that tend to lean towards the hard rock heavy metal scene. And I never really put those things together. I was like, yeah, I loved heavy metal and dragons, like that was me. So they got it right once.
Yep. Says the man with 3 guitars and a keyboard behind him.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I got to keep up my reputation.
I did see your video. You were rocking it on that. I can't remember what song was now, but I did watch that video you had on your channel.
Oh, well, thank you. But those are those videos where I forget they're there until a friend of mine's like, "Hey, do you know this is still up?" I'm like, because most of the time
I think I just watched it because it was like halfway between your old videos, all the sermon stuff, and your new book videos. I'm like, what's this one?
Well, I've got a friend of mine that I work with, and he plays drums, and he was in a band, and he just randomly, he stopped me at work and he said, "Hey, I'm going to record a cover of a song and I'm going to send it to you. Can you put some guitar stuff on it?" And I was like, "I mean, I can try. What's the cover?" He goes, "I don't want to tell you." And then he sent it to me, and it was Ghostbusters. And I was like, "Oh yes, I'm in," Then he sent me another one, and it was like a Miley Cyrus song. I'm like, "Nah, I'm out." Like, I'm sorry. Like, I could do that, but I'm like, "That's all you, buddy. You can have that one."
Hey, at least he felt comfortable with you enough to ask, because I don't think I know anybody that I would ask to cover a Miley Cyrus song with me.
Well, he kind of wanted me to do the whole like, "Hey, can you put like a hard rock spin on this?" And I was just like, I don't even want to try. It's just not. It's not for me.
I don't usually like covers, but there is a guy I've seen online. I can't remember if it was TikTok or Instagram, but he'll just take a song's like, countrify this or rockify this or something like that.
Yes.
And he is good. Some of
Yes.
that stuff is good.
Yeah, it's amazing that a lot of the musicians now tend the more successful ones. Maybe that's too broad of a statement, but a lot more successful musicians are coming from the YouTube era. But that's because this is what kids watch nowadays. You know, they watch. I mean, if they're watching most of their what's going on, Matt? If they're watching all of their favorite TV shows and all those other things on YouTube, like why wouldn't they watch their favorite musicians on there as well? And so that's actually like both of these guitars are signature guitars from YouTubers, you know, and it was just, I just loved them. And so I picked them up and it seems to be a pretty big trend right now.
YouTube, Twitch, not the same because Twitch, I mean, I came over to YouTube from Twitch. Downside with Twitch is that your VODs don't stay. It's like after 2 months, all the videos disappear. You talked about having YouTube to save things. That's the reason I came.
Yeah.
I didn't even come over to YouTube, I should say. I was doing interviews on Twitch and then saving them to YouTube. And then I wouldn't look at YouTube again until my next author interview when I would save it to YouTube. But
I did the same kind of thing with when I was posting my Sunday school. I did a whole Sunday school series through the book of James, and I recorded it and I put it out for the people to watch at home, because at the time I was trying to live stream, and there's just, I mean, as you know, there's just so many problems with live streaming, and it's gotten a lot better over the years, but 5 years ago, man, trying to live stream, it was a nightmare. OBS would crash for no reason, or you wouldn't have audio and you had no idea that anyway. And so I realized, I'm like, rather than try to live stream it to people while I'm at church teaching, interacting with people in the room, and then also trying to, give them that type of ambience, like it seems like they're sitting in the room with me. It was such a hassle. And then I also realized the people in the room had a very difficult time being comfortable speaking up, because they were worried they were going to be on camera or even be heard. And so they didn't. A good friend of mine, he said, I didn't want to ask a stupid question, and then be criticized over it. And I didn't even think about that. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to record it Saturday. I'm going to schedule it to go out Sunday. And then I'll just teach the same lesson in class Sunday. And then those people who show up to class are actually getting the more polished version, because I've already taught it, And so now when I go back and I watch those, because every once in a while because I think I posted those in 2020, maybe 2021. And the church we were going to, they wanted me to go through the book of James again. And so I was like, okay, great. That's easy for me. I can just kind of work out some of the kinks that I messed up last time. But I ultimately ended up finding myself going, oh man, I'm just like, this is absolute garbage. I have to rewrite this whole thing, So that's why I try to, even with my book reviews and stuff, I'm like, I'm going to watch it the one time where I'm editing it. I'll watch it to completion just to make sure that I don't have something messed up. And then I am never going to watch this again.
Yeah, I wasn't laughing at you, by the way. My dumb brain was just picturing you recording this video for YouTube or whatever. And then on Sunday, just, wheeling out the monitor, clicking play for everybody. When it's over, let me know if you have any questions. I want to do this twice. Oh, man. All right. By the way, anybody in the chat, I know there's a few of you out there. If you have any questions for Josh, throw them out there. I will be happy to pass them along. Although from the sounds of things, it looks like I've seen you react a couple things. So I think he's got YouTube up as well. So
yeah. I'm just so all over the place. I've had several people they go, okay, well, I see you have book reviews you're posting now. And I see you've posted some guitar videos, and I see that you've posted some sermons, and I see that you posted some Sunday school lessons. So what is this? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's whatever I'm in the mood for at the time. Right now, it was just like I said, it was just easier for me, because I was just so lazy to just go, I'm just going to keep recording these videos. I'll change the name and I'll start putting them out on here. And then I noticed very quickly that the people that were subscribed because of the sermons I was posting, who I know personally, were unsubscribing rapidly when I was posting book stuff. Because like I started out with like 40 subscribers or something, and then they were like, "Why are you talking about why are you talking about wizards and stuff on like what is this?" And I'm like, I had to qualify at church. I'm like, look, y'all don't just disregard that. And then as soon as I said that, there were like 30 people that unsubscribed. I'm like, okay, maybe not that fast. That kind of hurt my feelings.
And I think, and I say this tongue in cheek since he's an author, I think Dennis is just making stuff up now. Mormon Catholics. I don't even think that's a thing.
Unfortunately, Miss Myers, I have not written anything, at least not anything of any quality. So maybe one day, maybe when I'm retired.
Yeah. This is just a fellow booktuber. He's the one that I told you about because he suggests fantasy books and he lets you know. He gives you what's in them so you know whether to pick them up or not. So
my buddy Brian and Ted, they both the buddy read that we did, I actually DNF'd it. And I felt terrible, because I had no kidding, there were 4 books back to back that I DNF'd. And so I was waiting for, just like a lighthearted read. And I thought the buddy read that we were going through was it. And then we went, Ted said, like, do you mind hosting it on your channel? I was like, no, that'd be great. Cause I'm thinking that's a free video for me that I don't have to record later. It was Everyone on the Train is a Suspect. And I loved the first half of it, but I have become so, maybe averse is too strong of a word, but the gratuitous inclusions tend to be where I get the most pushback, which it's completely justified. It's just, again, it's my perspective and my experience reading books. And so there's a passing scene in the book where, like I said, it is just so inconsequential that there's a same-sex relationship in there. And ordinarily, I probably would have just kind of rolled my eyes and went through it because it's like, okay, he checked his box, which is very much how it seemed. It was just like, okay, move on. It doesn't pertain to the story at all. But because I had read 3 other books back to back that were all more explicit, that then it was so glaring. It was like, I explained it to a friend of mine. He's like, really? What? Like, it was so nothing. And I said, well, how when you buy a new car, you notice that car on the road all the time. It's a similar thing. It's like, I just kept getting bombarded with the same thing over and over that I'm having to put books down. And I just needed a break from it, at least to take a breath. And then when I got into it, I was like, oh, that's it. And so I put it down, but we made it all the way through the review until we got there, and they didn't know that I was just like, I DNF'd it. And they were both like, that's it. Like, you should change your name to the Reformed DNFer. It's like, you just DNF books all the time. I'm like, I promise everybody, I love to love books. I do not look forward to hating a book or to criticizing a book in a negative way. I just, for me, there are certain things that I have grown more restrictive on what I intake. Brian, I know you are. Love you, buddy. But there are so many things that I've just, as I've matured as a Christian, that I've become I want to be entertained by less. Yeah. He owned me.
I meant to click on Matt. Sorry about that.
But because of that, I actually mentioned in several of my videos that I am pretty sure that my favorite books will not be my favorite books for very long, with some exceptions. And the reason is because I hope that as I mature as a Christian, that sin becomes more offensive to me and not less. And so that means that there's going to be many books that I currently I just absolutely love that I know that if I go back to, I'll have to put down. What books are you most excited to read coming up next, Josh?
I was going to wait till you finished your sentence.
Oh no, I will not be quiet. So you can just at any point. I'm really excited to read Count of Monte Cristo with my wife for a myriad of reasons. I cannot wait to read it to completion. I'm pretty sure it will most likely dominate my favorite book of all time. But also I've never read a book with my wife, and we're both avid readers. So I think that'll be really fun to do. But yeah, there's a book in particular that got me back into reading I promise I did not plan this, but is Ready Player One. I absolutely love this book. It was such nostalgia in a book for me. All the late 80s, early 90s video game references and pop culture. I mean, I was so bought into it that I bought it for a friend of mine, and he read it. And then he goes, "I'm surprised you like this." And I said, "Why?" And he's like, "Well, there's some things in there." Little Women. I've got that one on the list. He said, "There's some things in there that, I'm just surprised." And so I was like, well, I wonder what it was, because I haven't read this book in a couple of years. So I went back and read it, and I was like, there's, I was a little disappointed the second time. And while I do, I don't like that I don't like the Reformed DNFer. I don't like that I like books less now, but in the same sense, I understand that the scriptures teach that we are to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, and we're to dwell on what is good and holy and righteous and pure and faithful and those types of things, and less on worldly things. And so as I'm trying to be as diligent as I can, which I am failing at miserably at being a diligent, faithful student of the scriptures. But I do notice that the more I'm diving into the scripture, the less accepting I am of gratuitous sin in a book. And really, that's what it comes down to. We talked about that before. It could be, of the 5 things that I break down as far as my content warnings, it all comes down to is it gratuitous? Is it just in there to check those boxes? Because Brian over Adventures in Literature, he actually said, well, you have to have conflict. There has to be something in there. There has to be a moral right and wrong. Otherwise you have no story. You just have people that are sitting around cuddling teddy bears all day. Like that's, nobody wants to read that. Nobody cares. There's no conflict. And so the conflict has to come from a moral standpoint somewhere. And then my favorite types of books ask the question of, is this moral objectivity or is this moral subjectivity? And then, then you have to kind of parse that out. And then my most favorite are the ones that don't answer you, or don't give you a clear answer. They let you figure it out for yourself. And so that's why when I think of things like Count of Monte Cristo, somebody said, well, that book's full of lying and murder and hate and pretty much everything. I mean, there's even a same-sex couple alluded to, and they're like, well, why is that permitted but not over here? I'm like, I'm not going to give you an answer that I think will satisfy your question, because my answer is just like, because it's different, and I can't extremely articulate, or I can't articulate well why it's different, other than the intent seems different, rather than something that's just like, some of these romance books that you see in Walmart nowadays that have like the front cover is 2 men kissing or something. And I'm like, okay, I'm out.
Well, I think too, I mean, again, getting back to gratuitous and glorified, I mean, if you don't want war or sex or anything like that, you've got to toss out your Bible too. I mean,
right, exactly. And that Brian made that point very much so, is if I didn't want to read.
Uh-oh. Looks like Josh is going to have to put another quarter in the machine. Hopefully he'll be back in a second. We'll see how that goes. The issue with live stream, the internet is not always a kind place. It could be worse. I accidentally knocked my... Hey, there he is.
All right, guys. But yeah, like you were saying, yeah, the Bible is, I've heard some people say, the Bible is rated R. It's not rated R. The Bible is rated X. If you're actually reading your Bible, there's a lot in, I mean, if you just think of the story of David, you know, I mean, this guy stole another man's wife and he just got DNF'd. Matt,
All right. That was a good one, Matt.
let me just tell you, Matt, in our we have a little Instagram chat, dude. Matt owns me all day. He has no idea how hard I laugh at some of his comments. But yeah, you look at the story of David. I mean, David, you know, he stole a man's wife and then he essentially murdered him with an army, and then he is able to repent of that. And then some people were like, well, that's condoning murder, or that's condoning adultery. It's not condoning it. It's just stating a historical fact, you know, or I've heard several people say, well, there's slavery in the Bible, so the Bible condones slavery. And I mean, you could say that about anything that's in the scriptures. It's like, it's not condoning it. It's just a historical record. And so if it's a historical record, like, that shouldn't be omitted. And then I heard one of my favorite pastors that I've ever heard, he said, the Bible does an excellent job of tarnishing the reputation of every character in the book except one. And it's not to show us, you know, I hear a lot of sermons that say things like, yeah, there's bits in Ezekiel that my Bible professor told me not to quote from the pulpit for its content. Yeah, there's some things, you know,
Song of Solomon can get a little racy.
Yes, it can. So my son, we had our son read through Song of Solomon during homeschool, and we just heard him giggling, you know, because there's some good stuff in there. Yep. He's like, I can't believe that's in there. But if for the people that are pretty well versed in scripture, if you know the story of Dinah and how the revenge of Dinah is pretty hardcore, you know, it's like somebody could make a movie of this. And so it's not condoning these things, or even polygamy. They say, well, you know, all of your biblical heroes had multiple wives, so God is clearly okay with people having numerous wives. Well, it never says that. As a matter of fact, it shows you that God has a very specific prescription for marriage, and anytime that we try to subvert that in any way, there's negative repercussions. And so when people were like, well, slavery's in there, so God condones it. No, the whole point of the Israelites being slaves was so that God would redeem his people. It's not. And the thing is people tend, I say people, I'm generalizing here, but oftentimes when we read scripture, I think it is our innate selfishness that has us trying to figure out who we are in scripture. It's like, okay, well, how does this story relate to me? Like, what is this saying to me or about me, or what is it doing for me is really the more common question, when really it's not about you at all. And the things where you are found in scripture, they're the things that are saying, like, you are guilty, like you are guilty under these same things for the same reason. You know, when we read about Abraham and telling people, was like, hey, please, you know, talking about his wife, he says, please tell them you're my sister, so that way they won't kill me. And God preserved them, even though in spite of Abraham lying and breaking the commandments. And Abraham, you know, people were like, well, see, lying's okay to the Lord. Then it didn't say that. You're implying that. Instead, what it's showing us is that while Abraham is this hero of scripture, he's this upright man, and David being described as a man after God's own heart, but look at what he's done, right? And all that is to show this isn't just them, but these are the best of us. These are the best that men have to offer. And look at who they really are. Their sins have found them out. And that's you, right? And that's what scripture is saying. We are the ones that fit that mold. The only thing we bring to our salvation is the sin that is necessary for it, not anything good, not anything inherently good. And so the stories within the scriptures are not to try to show you, you know, hey, you should be just uplifted with every story, but it's so that it points us to Christ instead of pointing inwardly. And so that's why when I'm seeing these things and people that tend to be a little more critical on our like, for instance, when I say in my videos that I'm reviewing these things through the lens of a Christian under the authority of the scriptures. I'm trying to do my best at doing that, but I understand that I'm a hypocrite, and that I'm not doing it well. And so when I say certain things, or if I say like, I wouldn't read this book because it's got a gratuitous same-sex relationship, which tends to be the most inflammatory statement that I've made numerous times. And I understand that.
It's 2025.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right. I understand that. And some people are more forgiving about those things. Maybe forgiving is the wrong word, but they're more accepting of those types of things in their art, and understood. But for me, I'm not. And so I notice anytime that I say, well, for me in my house, we aren't going to be entertained by these things, that I lose subscribers rapidly. And so it's because I'm trying my best, which is an absolute atrocity, but I'm trying my best to emulate Christ because of what he's done for me. And so if that's the case, then shouldn't I actually be more critical of some of these things? And so it really started when I started posting these reviews. It started because when Wind and Truth came out, I got far enough into it that there were just red flags going up all over the place. And I worried that some of my friends, very close friends, that I'd given Way of Kings and Words of Radiance to, and Words of Radiance was my top book for the longest time. And I was like, I had to tell them, like, I don't know that I can keep promoting this author, because it's very evident that there's an agenda here that he wants to drive home, and that's his prerogative. It's his work. He can do what he wants to with it. But then I have to decide as the audience what I'm going to do with that information. And so when I hear people say things like, well, you're a hypocrite because you say that you're a Christian, but you don't, you don't love people because, you won't read this book that's got a same-sex relationship in it. And my answer is always like, I try to use what a friend of mine called the Jesus method, which is where he answers a question with a question. And it was, okay, well, wouldn't it be more hypocritical of me as a Christian who says I'm under the authority of the scriptures to not just accept this, but then promote it? Because to me, it seems like that would be more hypocritical, because I say that I hold to this creed and to the authority of the scriptures, and yet I'm bucking up against it by promoting it. And so that's why I was just like, look, we can disagree. And I don't think it's always okay to agree to disagree. I know people say that all the time, but somebody's wrong, right? So, I mean, now if it's completely subjective, if it's like, I like this book and I say you're wrong, that's different. But when we're talking about objective morality in that case, which is, people coming to me and saying, I should not have posted a 1-star review on my favorite book because of these reasons. I'm like, okay, well, then you're projecting your subjective morality towards me. And all I can do at this point is say, I'm not basing it off of my own morality. I'm basing it off of the living word of the Lord. And so if he says not to be entertained or to promote or to permit these things, then I shouldn't, regardless of what I want. And that's been very difficult, because let me tell you, there's been some crazy good stories that I've had to put down, and it has pained me to do so. And Stormlight was top of the list. I loved it so much. I had all of Sanderson's leather bounds. I had all of his special editions, his signed copies. I was that guy there for a while. And it just felt like he broke my heart, because I trusted him. And not because I knew we lined up theologically, because I know we don't, but because of his Mormon background, I could count his work as safe for me to consume, because I knew he wouldn't go there. And I would say that about several things, like George R.R. Martin. I know a lot of people love Game of Thrones, and rightfully so. From what I understand, the story is amazing, but I don't want to read sexually explicit scenes either. And so, I'm trying to be consistent. Sam, unfortunately, Sam, I sold every one of them and made a ton of money off. No, I'm just kidding. I did sell them all. I got rid of all of them, and thankfully that market was up, so I didn't lose money. But yeah, but things like Game of Thrones, I'm like, I know I would love Game of Thrones, but there's just certain things that I can't, that I personally can't get past convictionally, and so I don't need to push those convictions aside so that I can enjoy some entertainment. I need to cling to those convictions and then figure out what I can enjoy under God's prescription. So, I mean, again, that's why when I tell people, you know, my reviews are very subjective, and I try to be super objective in the most objective in a subjective review. And it's just hard to do, you know? So when I say like,
well, I mean, every review is subjective.
Exactly. So when I said, well, I'm going to break this, you know, instead of me at the end just going, well, here's some things I didn't like, or here's some sins in here that are in the work that maybe you won't like. It was just such a broad statement that I'm like, well, maybe if I rate it out of 10, it'll give people a better picture of what's in here. And then on top of that, yeah, exactly, Sam. I'm of the same mindset. But you know, if I give a more detailed description of of the content that's inside the book, then it'll give the watcher, the audience, or whoever a better idea of whether or not they actually want to pick it up. Because what ended up happening is when I was being broad, people were like, okay, you said there's some sexually explicit content in here. Like, how severe is it? And then I'd have to go in the comments and, you know, try to be as spoiler free as possible. Or I would say, hey, there's some language in here, but I don't think it's all that bad. And then people were like, what does that mean? What does not all that bad mean? Is it, you know, is there tons of blasphemy in here, or is there just F-bombs, or is there like, you know, filth words? Like, what's in here? And so I was like, okay, it's going to be better if I break it up in this way for you guys and for me, because it keeps my reviews more condensed too, because I won't, you know, ramble on like I've been for a while.
Hey, these are the type of interviews I love, because I don't even have to come up with any questions. I can just sit back. This has become TV for me.
My brother, just again, I'm the guy that's like, squirrel. My oldest brother, he got tested for ADHD a couple years ago, and he came back and he had his results, and that he called me. I was like, hey, so how'd it go? And he said, don't go get tested. And I said, why not? He goes, because you definitely have it. And I was like, what? Like, I don't get
I just saved you money.
Yeah. I was like, what do you like? I'm not compulsive. And he goes, no. A lot of the symptoms were like impulsive buying, inability to be quiet, inability to listen. And I was just like, well, gotta go. But yeah, so that's what, at the end of the day, even with that rating system I have on a scale of 1 to 10, that's still subjective. Yeah. And so I'm like, I would give it a 5, but you might give it a 12 out of 10. And so I don't really know how much more detailed I can get. But I did realize that I kept saying, I want to be the common sense media for Christians with science fiction and fantasy for the most part. But then I didn't follow their formula. And Sam was like, hey man, it'd be great if you were a little more descriptive about this. And I'm like,
well, like you and I talked earlier about dub.org, and the one thing that I can't imagine how those poor reviewers actually enjoyed a movie ever.
I know,
because you'd be looking at their description and it'd be like, D word 3 times, S word 2 times. I'm like, what are they sitting there with a pad and pen the entire time?
A friend of mine and I, we were talking. He said, I wonder if they have a different person for each swear word. And it's like, all right, you pick this and then we're all going to watch it and start. I'm like, that would be the worst job ever. I am very thankful there's somebody that does it. That's right. It's like, well, I guess I'm going back to Barney. That's right. You know, but it's crazy. It's crazy because the variation, not just within Christianity, because it's so broad. They probably have a cheat sheet. Yes, I certainly hope so. Oh, I missed one. That's a half of one. Because they kind of held it. They didn't say the vowels, so that's okay. But
like half the stuff bleeped out on TV today. You only heard the consonants, so it's fine.
Yeah, the one that kills me is you get on YouTube, because I love watching like fail videos with my kids and stuff, but they'll bleep out F-bombs, but they're like, GD's fine. I'm like, okay, well, it's not in my house. So I'm like, okay, we have a different understanding of what swearing is.
Oh, trust me, I've seen a few where they like bleep out something and not something else. I've even seen like they don't bleep out the F, but they bleep out. I'm like, what?
Yeah, or somebody says a hole and they bleep out the word hole, but they don't bleep out the other one. And I'm like, that makes zero sense.
Yeah, there's a few of them out there that are a little weird.
But yeah, it was, at the end of the day, it did come down to, it was like, okay, I should, if I'm going to say I'm going to try to follow this format, then I need to follow the format and not just do my own thing. And so it's going to take some tweaking, but I do really love being able to provide that kind of service. And then on top of that, they became my videos, I think, were becoming kind of stale, just because it was sort of the same thing over and over. I don't have a big studio or anything. I mean, I just shoot in front of my TV in my living room, and so I was like, well, how do I breathe some life into this? And my friend Dustin over at Preacher Reads, which his channel is fantastic, but he actually recommended, he was like, hey, what do you use to edit? And I said, I use DaVinci Resolve. And he was like, why in the world are you going? Because the nuance in that, you have to learn another language. I'm like, it's just what I've always used. And so he said, try CapCut. And so I did it. I used CapCut for about a month. And because he said, I explained to him, like, well, unless there's something out there that will automatically delete my ums and uhs and awkward silences or repetitions, then I don't want it. And he said, it does that. And I just started laughing. I'm like, okay, well, sign me up. And so I did. I signed up for a month, and I liked that it cut down my workflow quite a bit, but it also seemed to suck the life out of my video, because I think a large part of the fun, the little bit of fun that's in my videos is where I'm making fun of myself for going, and so I'm like, if I can make fun of myself, I want yes, CapCut does do that, Sam. It's amazing. But like I said, I like when we're talking, I mean, we can just cut up with each other and somebody can make fun of me of just about anything. And that is, to me, builds that camaraderie and that brotherhood. And so when I was doing that before and I was leaving those mistakes in there, it made it personable. And then when I removed it, it just seemed like, here is a review and this is the information. And I'm like, if I'm going to do that, somebody else does a better job than I do. And so why do it? So I'm trying to be informative and entertaining, and hopefully somebody gets something out of it.
Well, I think I'm with you too in the fact, like, even the ones, I mean, obviously we're not going to do anything to this live video, but when I do have one that's recorded, sometimes if there's like a space, I'll cut that out.
Yeah.
But if it's like right on the flow where you have to, like, it's really choppy to cut it out. Or sometimes I just leave it in there because it sounds natural. Almost everybody has an or a so or a something to let your brain catch up with your mouth.
Well, I had one, I think it might've been a video I posted last week or so, but I was editing it and I noticed there was like a 10-second just pause, because I've realized that when I get to the point, of
don't listen to her.
Where like, I've realized if I'm trying to make a point, but for some reason the word is escaping me, I'm not going to move around a bunch until I think of the word. I'll just freeze and then I'll just go, okay. And then that way, when I cut it, it almost looks like there's not a cut there. And so I started doing that, but then I left like a 10-second just blank space there. And I go, you know what I was doing right here? And so I layered in the dial-up sound. And Brian over Adventures in Literature, he was like, that owned me, because I do that all the time. So I actually have a video eventually I'm going to put out that is just like flubs. I mean, it might be like 30 seconds of just me going, and making ridiculous faces or getting interrupted by my kids or my dog or somebody slamming a door, because that's, to me, it's like, if you're not having fun with it, it definitely does. The audience can tell, number one, but also it's like, if I'm not having fun with it, I'm not going to do it just for the sake of, I made a commitment to put out 2 videos a week. Well, I only made that commitment to me. And so, if I don't feel like putting out a video this week, then I won't. And I'll let people know because they may be expecting it. But otherwise, if I'm not having fun with it and trying to help some brothers and sisters out along the way in whatever small way I can, then, there's no point in me continuing.
But yeah, also too, I think everybody has that moment though where your brain freezes, and it sucks if it happens on a live stream. But and I know, like, when I talked to John one time, he was talking about the fact that he always thought, because I told him, every time I get on one of these, like right before it, I'm a little nervous.
Yeah.
Like, you seem so relaxed or whatever. Is like, I'm thinking, okay, you saw the short I did today, announcing, reminding you people that you were going to be on tonight. You guys didn't get to see how much of that middle section got cut off because I kept screwing up Patricia Shanae Smith's name. And then when I finally got it right, I messed up the word interview. So that was like a 3-minute video that's like 60 seconds.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times
section over and over again before I finally got it right.
I can't tell you how many times I was talking about Dungeon Crawler Carl recently, and I could not get that out. I mean, it was probably 40 takes, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm about to throw this computer. I'm just going to say DCC and hope everybody knows what I mean, because I can't get it. I'll be good. Dungeon Crawler Carl. I'm like, of course, then, my wife and my kids are like behind the camera, and they're just horse laughing. I'm like, you'll have to stop because I got to try to get this out.
Well, I mean, that's what I mean. So our favorite thing is the like movie bloopers almost anymore.
Yes.
Even professional actors who get paid to talk all the time, they still sometimes certain words don't work.
Yeah. I've actually heard, I think it was Tom Cruise. There was I can't remember what word it was, but for some reason he couldn't get it out with his, it was right after he got his implant with his teeth. And for some reason, the S's were just throwing him. And so he was like, change the script. I can't get it out.
or when you bite your tongue, right?
Man. Yeah, that was so bad. I was to the point to where, I wasn't going to put that in there because I thought, well, if I don't mention that I've bitten my tongue, most people probably won't notice, but I was certainly enunciating my S's a little too hard. And so I was just like, I couldn't get it out. And then I bit my tongue 4 more times trying to record the video.
Yeah.
I was just like, all right, I'm going to finish this. And then I'm not doing another video all week. And I'm going to have to pull some.
Biting your cheek because then it swells, which just makes it easier to bite.
Yep. It's the worst. Or it's like right when you're about to enjoy that nice piece of steak or something, you're like, been waiting all day, and then you bite your cheek or your tongue. Yeah. One of my favorite flubs is Benedict Cumberbatch when he was doing. Oh my goodness, that's so good. That's so funny.
I was thinking of that before you even said it.
As soon as because we watched the whatever it was, Blue Planet, and we were sitting there with our kids, and he said penguin, and we all go, like, what did he say?
The uncle pronounces it like at least 2, if not 3 different ways. And I'm thinking, why is nobody telling him?
I don't know.
Recorded this whole thing.
I think everybody was just too afraid to tell him he was saying it wrong. They're like, we'll fix it in post.
The only other thing I could think of is if it was one of those things where he was recording in a sound booth, away from the thing, because he's obviously not in the show.
Sure. Yeah.
And he just sent it in, and they're like, nah, well, this is what we get to work with.
He's such a talented guy. And then I saw, my wife loves watching the clips from, what is his name? He's got the talk show in England.
Graham Norton.
Graham Norton.
Yes.
And he had him on there. And then he said, he was like, now let me ask you a question. And then he was like, is this the penguin thing? Please don't bring it up. And then it was like a 5-minute segment.
Yeah.
You just see him. He was just melting in his chair.
That's still not as bad. And I know we're getting off topic, but have you seen the one with Patrick Stewart?
It sounds
Hugh familiar. Jackman was on it too, and he was talking. It was like, so I heard you had, and it's the fact that Patrick Stewart thought he was.
Thought he was, but he wasn't. Had the doctor check while you're down there.
Nope.
That was so good. Oh man,
how do you not know what that is?
I don't know. But he lied. I think he lied to several people.
He about killed Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman was just rolling.
Oh man, I mean, there's several times where some of those clips will just own me, and I'm like, I cannot believe they allow this on television.
I'm also thinking, is Graham Norton, like if Graham Norton wanted me to be on, A, I'd say I'd be no, and B, I'd be like, who are you talking to? Because I know you've got a story.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You've dug deep enough that there's something about to come out that I don't want coming out.
Yes.
That's exactly right. It's the perfect punchline.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. That was such a weird one.
Well, what are
I
you
did
reading
see
right
something the
now?
other day. Somebody talked about Cumberbatch being in like some Bible thing or recording some Bible thing.
Really?
And some like, I don't know if it's like,
Mm.
I don't remember what it was now. It might be like one of those word things where like they record, like James Earl Jones reading the Bible
Yeah.
or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And somebody's like, you mean Bethlehem Christ is us? Because nobody can get his name right.
Yeah.
I'm like, somebody put a little time into thinking that one. It's like, okay, I will give that one credit.
Yeah. Mr. Cumberbunt is going to be narrating. So what are you reading right now? You diving into something good?
Are you throwing that at me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Actually, right now I'm reading a book that, if my mother's still on, do not read this book. I like the writing, but it does have some language in it.
Yeah.
The Devil's by Joe Abercrombie.
Yeah.
And I'm finishing it up so I can send in the review.
Mm.
Love the sense of humor. Sense of humor for Joe Abercrombie is excellent, but yeah, it's a little too vulgar.
Yeah. Yeah. That's there was see, Joe Abercrombie. See, I can't even say it. Joe Abercrombie has been one that has been, he's widely renowned for I mean, his work, and it's one of those where I've really wanted to get into, and then I think that he's probably just not going to be for me. And it's kind of been, I've had several Christian brothers that were like, you didn't miss much, Ted. Don't worry about it. We were making fun of you guys, making fun of me about DNFing everything. So, nothing new.
I've only been on for an hour and 40 minutes. You missed nothing.
But I've had several Christian brothers that said that, yeah, I wouldn't be, it's probably not my thing, which is fine. Yeah. That's I've heard First Law. They're like, it's pretty rough.
That's what the replay's for, Ted.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so I'm like, hey, Joe Abercrombie is one of those guys that I can clearly see that if I have some Christian brothers that love Game of Thrones and some grim dark type stuff, that I could see how that they would like that. It's hard for me to recommend, number one, because I haven't read it, but I definitely am like, hey, if you like those kinds of books, I can point you to channels that have more, that kind of lean more into that direction. Like I know Sam has read several. I know he likes to get sometimes into the morally gray guys. Preacher, or Dustin over at Preacher Reads does. He likes some of the morally gray guys. He likes a lot of the horror type books and those types of genres. And I just, most of the time I kind of am like, I'm a pretty traditional sword and sorcery kind of guy, or if it's sci-fi, I'm kind of game for most things. But it always comes with like, what, just let me know ahead of time, should I or should I not read it? And that's what's been kind of more difficult for me as I say a Christian, because I don't want to paint with a broad brush, because everybody is different and every Christian has different preferences and those types of things. But for me, it's been difficult because there are certain things that I don't want to be entertained by certain things. Or so what I have to do when I'm going to look for a book is, like, Mike will recommend a book and it will sound just killer. And then I'll have to go in and let me Ted's owning me. But I'll have to go in and kind of like reverse engineer my search, because I can't put, like, the Devils, for instance. I can't go in there and put, like, does the Devils have bad language, or does it have, sexually explicit content, or fill in the blank? Does it have that in there? Because most of the time I won't get a result. But if I look on the flip side and I'll say something like, the Devils inclusive, or is this book have spicy scenes in it, those kind of keywords. And then so once those come up and that people give those big thumbs up, I know so okay, I'm going to go ahead and back out, because for some Christians, and I think there tends to be Christians in sort of three broad categories, which is you have like the more as far as who read, you have the more conservative reader, you have the more liberal reader, and then you have people that are kind of just a mixed bag of whatever. And so I tend to lean more conservative. And so I would much rather, just personally, I would much rather not read a book that sounds amazing and miss out than read a book and then feel ashamed that I finished it. Now, I don't think that's the case with everybody, but I definitely think some people are more prone to, and that was like an extreme there, but I think people, there are some people that are more prone to being like, I can overlook some of that stuff and just because I know the story's good, or I can overlook aspects of the author. And like, I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'll high five you. I'm not going to argue with you because that may be for you. But for me, I've used this several times, but my litmus test tends to be with my son, because he's 11 and he's an avid reader, but he's also like my best buddy, and so that's such a cool feeling that he wants to be like me, and he wants to like the things that I like, and he wants to, like, he loves going back and watching the old Pokemon and Power Rangers and those shows I grew up with, and it's so cool to get to relate to those things. And so when I look at the books on my shelves, he loves going over there and pulling stuff off. And, of course I'm freaking out because I'm like, don't damage the pages, like, don't ding the cover, and he's like, can I look through this? I'm like, yes, very slowly. But if I hear a page rip, I'm coming unglued, but he's like, can I look at your books? I'm sure. And so I realized one day that I had some books on my shelf that I personally would have felt very uncomfortable if he pulled it off the shelf and opened it up and read. And I'll just be extremely forthcoming that I read Stephen King's Fairy Tale. It's the only Stephen King book that I've read. And I thought it was fine. The first half to me was amazing. And then the second half, I was just like, you could have stopped at the first half and I probably would have been fine. Would have been a fantastic book. And so then I started finding all these Stephen King books at thrift stores. And so I started just a collection. I had a huge Stephen King collection and I hadn't read any of them but the one. And then so somebody gifted me the book It, and they're like, oh man, you'll love, because they knew that I loved the old movie Silver Bullet. They're like, okay, well you'll love It. And, I'm like, okay, cool. And I'm down to, read about this clown, and I kind of already know the backstory, but yeah, I'm willing to give it a shot. And then my pastor actually came over and we were just hanging out at the house, and he saw it and he just goes, have you read that by any chance? And I said, no, I haven't yet. I plan to read it around October. And he didn't tell me do or don't. He just said, do me a favor. When I leave, I want you to turn to this section. And anybody that's read It knows the section that I'm referring to. But he's like, turn to this section. It's near the end of the book. Doesn't spoil anything, but just read this and let me know what you think. And he said, because I think if you read that and you're fine with it, you'll be fine with the book. But I think if you read that and you're averse to it, you probably need to refrain. And so I said, okay. And so I picked the book up and I read that, and I felt dirty. I felt filthy after reading it. And so at that point I was like, I don't know how this made it past his editors. Maybe just because of his notoriety, but I was like, I was like, I just had to push back against that and say, I can't be entertained by it. And if my son picked this book up and opened that up and read it, I would not just feel upset, but I would be so ashamed. And so a friend of mine asked me, as far as that goes, I said, well, I used The Diary of Anne Frank. I'm like, well, I don't want him to pick up that book right now either, because he's not ready for that. But there's a difference. It's like, if he picks that book up and I tell him, well, you're not ready for that yet, I wouldn't be ashamed if he learned about the Holocaust and the things that went on there. As a matter of fact, I hope, like, it is our intent to teach him about history, so that way it doesn't repeat itself, and so that he knows what's true and what happened and the atrocities that happened at that time. but it's very different when it's a number one, a work of fiction. And so it's just entertainment. That's all it's there for. And then it's very, it has some depraved undertones. And so at that point, I'm like, if I would be ashamed of my 11-year-old son picking it up, then I probably shouldn't be entertained by it either. And so at that point, it was very difficult for me, like emotionally and just fleshly. I did not want to let a lot of these books go, but I had a great purge that weekend, and it wasn't just him. It was several different books that I was like, okay, I need to go through here. And if my son were to pick this book up, how would I feel? And it's like, okay, this one's fun. This one's got to go. And I probably got rid of about 30 or 40 books.
You didn't give Sam first dibs on any of those either, did you?
No, unfortunately not. But it will probably make Sam feel better that none of them went to Goodwill. They were all sold at full price. But it is that. It's like, it just depends. It just depends on each individual person, because some people are perfectly fine. They're like, hey, this is for me. This isn't for you. And hey, you do what you think is best for your household, and I will champion that. And you know, I try not to imply or infer, like, to another Christian in particular, like, this is how you should be raising your kids. Now, if you're doing something unbiblical, then that's a different story, because you're, as brothers in Christ, are to come to each other and you can discuss those things. That's a different thing. But when it's preferential, you know, I've told friends of mine that are Christians, I said, look, unless you're doing something unbiblical, it's none of my opinion. But I will say that you know how to raise your kids better than I do. And so I'm not going to tell you how to raise your kids, just like I don't want you to tell me how to raise mine in the preferential things. As long as you're pointing them towards truth, you and I are good. And then at that point, if one of us crosses a line, then please come to me and rebuke me. And, but don't do it with, you know, I'm not going to like it. But if you come to me and you're like, this is what the scripture says, and this is what you're guilty of, like, I'm not mad at him. I will be mad, right? I will be mad, but I'll be mad at me. And because at that point, I am not affirming and upholding to the truths that I said I would. And so, you know, at that point, I am a hypocrite and I am living in error. And so it's more loving for that individual to come to me and say, hey, brother, I love you. And I love you enough that I'm about to have a hard conversation with you, because I don't want you to continue on in this way. And those are never fun. Those conversations are never fun, but they are always edifying. And so that's why, like, Sam and I, we've had some good discussion back and forth, and we just have two different perspectives, and that's awesome. You know, I'm the guy I'm not like, well, we see things differently about this, and so we can't be buddies. It's like, that's ridiculous. You know, it's like, no, you and I are brothers in Christ, and we have different experience, different history, different background, and all of those things play into the lens that I'm looking at this piece of art through. And then, you know, we have to decide what we're going to do with it. But ultimately, when it comes to fiction, you know, right, I just try to break it down to, like, this is entertainment, you know, and so I might miss out for, you know, a couple hours, but I'll be fine. You know, like Sam said, there's hundreds of other books out there that have been written that I will not have time to read, and they're good. So it's like, you know, I can always go back to those. I don't have to read the newest thing, even though it might get some clicks.
Well, I think we appreciate too the fact that, like you said, to be a friend with somebody or to have a conversation with somebody, you don't have to agree with everything.
Sure.
For instance, you know, I know based on your reviews, for instance, you're not into whole, like, demons and stuff like that.
Yeah,
being
right.
in the book, which I personally don't have an issue with, but I would not sit here and go like, you're wrong. Like, you know, if that bothers you, then
you would be surprised. So a lot of people do.
Yeah. Like one of my favorite books was Vespertine. It's borderline YA, but the gist of it, no spoiler, this is like chapter 2 stuff. The gist of it is this young girl is trying to save something, and they're trying to protect this, whatever. It's one of those, it's a typical fantasy type novel.
Yeah.
But because of the fact that this thing happens, she gets possessed by this demon.
Mm-hmm.
And some people would definitely have a problem with that. I, on the other hand, it's one of those things where this demon is like not as bad of a demon as somebody. He's very sarcastic.
Yeah.
He's not Beelzebub, for lack of a better term. But if that's still something that bothers you, I would never tell you to go read that, even though I love the book.
Exactly. Yeah. And scripture talks about that, but they use like the different kinds of food that you eat, or the alcohol. Alcohol is one of those points of contention among Christians, because some people are absolutists, like, hey, you shouldn't partake at all. And then other people are like, no, you have Christian liberty to do kind of whatever you want to. And then, I'm like, there's no sense arguing about this unless we're going to open the scripture and like, if we can sit down as brothers and first start saying, hey, I love you, and I'm going to love you after this, and we're not going to like each other any less after this. Now let's open our Bible and see what it says, not try to see if it'll agree with me, because it's probably not going to, because our flesh is involved at that point. But if I'm able to open the Bible with a brother of mine and we just come to a different conclusion about something, as long as it's not explicit, if it like blasphemy, for instance, like that's explicit. But if it's somebody smoking a cigarette, and somebody's like, oh, that's a sin, and somebody else says, well, no, it isn't, and then you have to, I don't think it's beneficial always to just go, well, we agree to disagree. I think it's more beneficial to go, well, let's discuss it, but we have to be able to discuss it in love and in truth. And if we can't do that, then maybe we shouldn't. But if we can come together and we can say, hey man, I love you, you're a brother of mine, and I know you love the Lord, and vice versa, and we're just trying to do the best that we can as far as our attempt to be a mirror of the son that has saved us, then okay, now let's start there. Let's not figure out where our end point is, so let's begin by saying everything that I think that I know about whatever is wrong. Because as Christians, that's what we believe. It's like when we come to repentance, it's not just that okay, I understand that I'm a sinner, and because I'm a sinner that I need a savior because I'm condemned, but it's that true repentance is understanding that my understanding of everything is flawed, because I am viewing the world through a flawed lens. And so if that's the case, I have to have those lenses not just cleaned, and obviously this analogy breaks down very quickly, but it needs to be completely transformed. And so once that takes place, then I can see things more clearly. But that won't take place when I'm dug in my own worldly trenches of, this is my preference, this is my experience, and so this is what's true. Well, not always, right? Not always. I heard my father-in-law is a mentor of mine. He says all the time, he says, always and never almost always means never. Right. And then, so when you hear people say like the word all, I have another mentor of mine that says all means all the time. And my father-in-law goes, well, no, it doesn't. Because if I said, hey man, Griff, he ate all the pizza. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean he ate all the pizza in the world? Does that mean he ate all the pizza that's here? I mean, does that mean he ate all the pizza that's left? Right. So you have to,
the piece you wanted.
That is very true. That's exactly right. And so we have to be able to define what we mean. And our English language is so, archaic, and that we have, like, in the sense that, we have one word for love, and that could mean all kinds of things to all kinds of people. Well, we have to figure out what we mean by that. And so if we can come together with the understanding of, first and foremost, I love the Lord, I want to put him first, and I am almost absolutely wrong unless I am absolutely wrong unless I am in agreement with the scriptures. That's my starting point. And now let's come together over the word and see what conclusion we come to. And it very well could be that I'm like, hey man, I feel fine drinking a beer and you don't. Well, you know what that means? That means I have the liberty to do so in my own home. as long as I'm not getting drunk, obviously, because it's explicit in there. But that doesn't mean when I come over to your house that I'm bringing a 6-pack. It means that I shouldn't do those things. And so it's similar, like you mentioned with reviews. It's like, I can recommend certain things to certain people, but I can't recommend all things to all people because I don't know where those distinctions that you have with your convictions are. And so it's like reading, and you can apply this with watching TV or the music you listen to. It's like, I mean, it's super subjective. And so when you get down to trying to objectify a subjective activity, it's kind of, it's kind of difficult for us to pin down, and it always leaves room for argument. And so I don't think there's a review that I've people agreed with me.
Yeah, right. Freezing up just a little bit there. Although I do have to say, I love the fact that your background goes really well with the background of my video.
That was completely intentional.
It's actually a little funny timing though, because yesterday was Sunday. During Bible class, the whole thing, the stumbling block and all that, we talked about all that stuff. So
it's
so I get to hear 2 days in a row.
Well, I've got a friend of mine that I started working with, and he's a Christian brother, and just about every day after work, because it just comes up. And sometimes I am intentional about, like, if I'm talking to somebody that is an unbeliever, and especially if they're in a dire situation, and how I work right now, I work with people individually and for hours and hours. And so we just are able to share different things. And sometimes it can get kind of heavy with some of the topics. And at that point, I'm like, look, there's hope for the hopeless, and that hope is in Christ. Or, I understand that you're mourning right now, and know that I mourn with you, and I mourn with you as a brother in Christ. But at the same time, at the end, almost every day at work, at least for the past month, my buddy has gone, as we're going out to our cars, he said, "Well, good service today." I'm like, it's not intentional. It's just, it tends to, for believers, normally when believers are having any kind of discussion and we're of the same spirit. And I know that's going to sound very, ethereal to people that are not part of the Christian community. I understand. But for those of us that are, all of our conversations, if they have any substance to them, almost always have a biblical base to them, or they always end up there somewhere. And it's because of that, we have brotherhood in Christ. And so because of that, I mean, it's the most important thing to us. So then why wouldn't it come up? Let me tell you, nobody, some of the comments that I got on my Goodreads for the Wind and Truth review, I mean, again, I've got pretty thick skin. I'm the baby of 3 brothers. And so some of the comments, while they were extremely mean, were hilarious. The funniest one to me, I don't know why it owned me so much, but I tried to qualify as much as I could why I thought this way. It wasn't just to bash Sanderson, because it's not that at all. I was hoping that I don't think Sanderson will ever see it, but I was hoping if he ever did, that it would just evoke some internal dialogue or some debate within himself. Like, maybe I went too far here, but anyway, one of the comments that somebody left just said, it was one word, and it just said soft. And I was like, that owned me so bad. I laughed. And of course my wife, she was like, "Please don't read those to me." I'm like, "You got to hear this one. It's hilarious." Most of them are talking about my hairline.
Critics sometimes I have to laugh at. I shared one I had Sarah Reese Brennan on, and normally I don't share 1-star reviews with authors because I think it's mean, but I had to share this one with her because I'm like, talk about somebody who missed the point. She literally wrote a book that was about a person in modern times getting sucked into a story, kind of like Inkheart, or one of those things. And then she complained about the fact that they were using modern language in a fantasy novel. I'm like, what part of a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court did you miss? The entire point of the book.
I tend, the only time Britton actually had me on his channel, I think it'll get posted later on, but
Some
he,
year.
he yeah, yeah, he had me, he just pulled up my Goodreads like while we were talking, and he was just like appalled. He was like, "You one starred this and this and this," and I was like, "Wait, before you end the call, like, let me qualify. The only time that I will actively put a 1 star is if I had to DNF it, and if it's like a traditionally published book, because look, my review is not going to hurt Brandon Sanderson's sales. It's not, and that's fine. But at the same time, for some people that are looking for an honest, or at least on, I was being honest in my review of that. I wasn't trying to be overly harsh. I was just trying to be transparent of why I DNF'd it, so that way maybe somebody else, if they had the same convictions I did, didn't pick it up. It wasn't me trying to convince somebody to not pick it up. I mean, despite popular belief, I actually like books. I do like books, and I want to like the books that I read. But I have read a couple of self-published books that I do not leave reviews for at all, unless it's a pretty glowing review. Just because I'm that I have that I leave to be to affect them negatively, because I know how much work and money they've had to invest in that piece of work, and it's not right for me to just try to dunk on them because I'm a hillbilly from Alabama that decided I want to be a critic. Like, that's not it at all. I'm trying to be as objective.
Oh, DNF twice in one show. I know. He'll be back in a second, I'm guessing. Although we're probably going to wrap it up here soon anyhow. We have been going for 2 hours. Ted's got a lot to rewatch. Oh, wait. Oh, now I'm seeing him twice. So let me kill that one. There we go. I actually had you on there twice for a second. I was like, that's different.
But yeah, actually, like I've actually read some self-published books that I wasn't a fan of, and the only I want to redact my previous statement a little while ago when I said that I hadn't been sent any ARCs. I've been sent now 2 advanced reader copies. Both were self-published. One I absolutely loved, and one was fine. And to me, the books that are fine, I have a harder time with than the ones I actively dislike, because it's like, it's just so forgettable. And so the author sent me the work, and I told him, I'm like, look, I'm not promising to write you a 5-star review. I'm just going to be honest. And he's like, that's all I want. That's all I want. I said, okay, cool. And so I read it. It was pretty good. It was very good, in the terms of self-pub, but it had some real glaring editing errors. And there was some of that modern speak, like the entire book was written in almost Old English, but then every once in a while that he'd say a phrase that was basically like, "What's up, dog?" or whatever. And there I'm like, it just kind of pulled me out, And so when I did the review, I gave it 4 stars, and I think it was a generous 4 on Goodreads. And I was just like, it was good. And I tried to talk about all the things I liked in it and be as encouraging to the author as I could. But when I got to some of the things that didn't work so much for me, I was just like, yeah, there's some editing errors in here that pulled me out a little bit, but nothing too bad. And then I got a private message from him, and he was like, dude, this is an advanced reader copy. It's going to have errors. And I was like, yeah, I get that. But it wasn't just that. It was some of the turns of phrase and thing that just pulled me out a little bit. And he said, yeah, but that can be fixed later. Like, why did you give me a 4-star? And I was like, do you want me to give you an honest review?
Yeah, you have to. Okay, well, Josh is going to give this this interview 1 star because he did not finish it. I'll have to see if he sees that part later.
With the internet, but because it says I've got a good connection, but whatever. but yeah, I got to that point where I was like, it was the first book I ever got sent, and I had that kind of a response from the author, and it really did take the wind out of my sails. I'm like, are all of them like this? Are they just want 5 stars and they don't want any criticism whatsoever, or what?
Some of them do.
Yeah, that's what I was like. You know what? I'm just not gonna like if somebody wants to send me an early book or whatever, I would love to read it, and if it's good, I'll give it a good review. But otherwise, I'm just gonna not even bother with it, because if you don't want to be
I had an
objective,
author send me a book one time, and I had issues with it, and I just gave him feedback. I didn't actually
sure.
star rate it on Goodreads.
Mm.
And I explained that to him, and he appreciated that. He was very,
Yeah.
very nice guy. In fact, I know he sent his book to a couple other people too. But it was his first book, and the kid wrote a book at like 18.
Right.
I
Well, that's
mean,
what people
not everybody can
criticized
be Rocky.
Aragon, and I'm like, dude, Christopher Paolini wrote that at like 15 or something. I'm like, I'm gonna give him a pass on some things.
Later, Sam.
See you, Sam.
Yeah, we have been going 2 hours though, so let me ask you a few follow-up questions, just because
I'm sorry, I ramble.
No, that's fine. Hey, like I said, this is the easiest interview I've had. I just throw something out there, and then 20 minutes later, I come back. You don't understand. This is just VR. I'm not even here. This is just
I'm so sorry. I'm so
I'm so sorry.
It's genuinely because of how nervous I am.
But some generic questions for you.
Yeah, hit me.
First of all, what are you reading right now?
So I just DNF'd that book with Ted.
Yeah.
But now I'm reading Star Wars Legends book, and is that Darth Maul book. It's really good. I think I'm going to pick up a couple of those real thin, just fast-paced, fly through them. And so I might pick up one of those. I may pick up that book that was sent to me and read it with my son, and then I'm probably going to dive into Count of Monte Cristo probably next week.
Gotcha. You actually had Lydia Kang on. She had written a Star Wars novel.
Really?
But Disney wanted to look at all of my questions, and so we just decided to talk about a different book altogether.
Well, I guess it shouldn't surprise me.
Well, but actually Lydia was happy because she'd been doing so much for Star Wars that week. She's like, it was nice to talk about one of her other books. So that was a plus. Another question I always like to ask, and since obviously we've covered the book channel a lot, what do you do when you're not reading for fun or for work?
Most of the time, I'm like, if I'm off work, I'm just hanging out with my wife and kids. I know it sounds like such a boring answer, but I love it. Like, on the weekend, I just want to hang out with my kids and my wife. And my wife's my best friend, and just under her are my 2 children. So, those. I'm a pretty boring, 35-year-old guy.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I talked about the Pokemon and the shows you were watching. I'm thinking is like, well, I'm feeling old right now.
Yeah. Power Rangers was real big for me.
Jetsons, but that's besides the point. All right. Other question I always like to ask: anything that you want to talk about that we did not ask you?
Ooh. Oh man, no, we've got 2 hours. I don't think. I'm sorry. No, I just honestly, when it comes to my channel, any reviews or anything I do going forward, like I love seeing my subscriber count go up. It's so much fun. But more than anything, and genuinely more than anything, I love just having those conversations with people in the comments. I love that people have sent me emails, and we've been able to we just talk about, like, we know that our kids' names and that kind of, like, I met people like Ted and Sam and Brian and Dustin. Like, it's just so cool to get to share that stuff. And so more than anything, I just really do hope that I am helping somebody in just a small way, something as silly as science fiction and fantasy books. Like, if I can help a brother or a sister just maybe be more prudent with their money and their time, like that just means the world to me. And so when I hear somebody say, hey, I picked this book up on your recommendation and absolutely loved it, and you definitely gave me those disclaimers, and I appreciate that. And then inversely, I've had people say, hey, I was going to pick this up and I didn't because of your review. And that one, I'm kind of like, well, I'm trying to be, I'm trying to be very nice. Like, I'm not telling you to actively not go pick it up, but they said, well, we actually have stronger convictions over those things than you do. And so I'm glad that you brought those up. And so those types of comments, man, they just mean the world to me. It shows that in it's such a small niche corner of YouTube that there are people like me that are Christians that just want to read wholesome books to be able to escape their 9 to 5, or, that their HVAC just went out yesterday, which happened to us, or, it's like, I just need to sit down and just kind of escape for a little while and just hear a good story that I'm not gonna be ashamed of reading by the time I die. Like that's what I want. Cause I don't think we should, as Christians, I heard somebody say, well, if that's the case, all we should do is read our Bible. And I had one individual actually message me and he said, man, I feel horrible that I'm wasting my time reading fiction because it seems like I should just be reading my Bible or listening to sermons. I'm like, man, God has given us these things to enjoy. Now we are to enjoy it under his like directives, but that's for our benefit. And, normally when we hear that, we hear that, that there's restrictions or rules. It's not that. It's like God has given us those things for his glory and for our good. And if we look at it like that, as a father, like as a one father to another, I gave my kids or give my kids rules in our house to protect them, not because I want to rule over them or lord over them, but because I love them. And so, when we approach even our entertainment, knowing it's like we're allowed to enjoy this, I'm allowed to enjoy Harry Potter. I understand there's some pushback from it, but I'm allowed to enjoy that. I don't have convictions over that. And it's not explicit in scripture that I shouldn't be reading this Harry Potter stuff because it's fake. So I have liberty to do so. And so do my other Christian brothers and sisters. But more than anything, I hope that there are some, as far as things we haven't discussed, we have a little, but I hope that somebody clicks on my channel that is not a believer and they're looking at like, why would a Christian look at these books from this perspective and see that we're not curmudgeons? They don't see that we're just constantly beating people over the head with scripture or whatever. But at the same time, I'm going to come to you in truth and love and say, like, unless you come to Christ first and foremost, we're not gonna see things in the same way. And so, I try to start off my review with that. It's like, look, if you're not a Christian, I'm not saying this channel isn't for you, because it might be, and I hope that I'm helping you in some way, or at least giving you some insight. But understand that from the get-go, you and I are on completely different wavelengths, and that's okay. But it is genuinely my prayer and hope for you that you would come to Christ, because not to benefit your life here on earth, not to make you a better person or to clean you up, but because he loves you enough that he sent his son, Jesus Christ, to come and die so that he could be the propitiation for our sins, so that we could be in right standing with him, because he loves us. And again, it's for his glory and for our good. And so that's really my hope, more than anything, is that something I say, hopefully I don't flub something, which I've been talking for over 2 hours. So I've said plenty of dumb things, but more than anything, I'm just like, I hope there's something that I say on here that points somebody to Christ. That's it. That's my goal. And if I've done that for one person, it's enough. And if I do that for somebody 20 years after I die and they stumble on one of my videos, then praise God.
Right. Well, and I think you're filling an important niche. I told you before, one of the reasons I told my mom about your channel is, anybody can go into a store and, Ted Decker or, one of the Amish books. But if you're somebody who loves dragons, like she does, there's not a really good place online these days that I have found to go up and just look, is like, hey, is Aragon, for instance,
Sure.
You know, how many bad words are in it? You know, how
Sure.
much sex is in it? How much this is in it?
Yeah.
So if you don't want to read that stuff, there's not a lot of places to go for that.
Yeah.
And like I said, you fill that niche and being able to tell somebody not, and again, you don't do it like they said this one word, don't go read it. It's like, this is how they talk.
Yeah.
If you have a problem with that, maybe think twice before you pick it up.
Sure.
Which
Well,
is
that's,
great.
you know, that's what I hope for. And I'm glad that I know that your mom watches, because I had a similar experience at church when my pastor's wife came up to me and she was like, "Hey, I decided to pick a book up that you recommended on your channel." I'm like, "You know about my channel?" You know, and then I'm like, "Oh no, what did I say?" And
Yeah.
so it's very it's humbling to know some of the people that watch.
Yeah. And then last question, I'm going to just to wrap it up. And I always ask this of everybody, shout out to a brick and mortar bookstore near you. Where
Oh
do you like to
man.
go?
There is a Christian bookstore. I know it seems like a canned answer, but there's a Christian bookstore in a little place called Coleman, Alabama, and it is literally just called the Christian Bookstore. It is Yates Chance Christian Bookstore, and they're a little mom and pop shop, and they carry everything from, you know, they'll rebind your Bibles just like you would think, or they sell Bibles there, but they have tons of fiction in there, and some of which are, I mean, they span from mysteries, thrillers, some even lean into kind of the horror genre and stuff, but they're written in such a way, or they're written and promoted in the Christian circle because they're kind of marked safe to read. And obviously, you know, they have like adults and like adult and kids sections, but man, I love that. I love going in there because it's one of those shops where you walk in, they know you by name, they got a smile on their face, and you can walk in and leave with nothing. And they just love that you came in and said, "Hey."
Yeah, I love having that bookstore that also knows you too. Like you walk in and they're like, "Hey, such and such just came in," because they
Yeah.
just know that's your thing.
Yeah. He came to freeload off of that book again. You know?
Oh my goodness! All right. Well, I want to thank you for your time. Like I said, we've been going almost 2.5 hours.
Well, thank you so much
You're
for
just trying
having
to
me.
beat Paul Jessup. That's all there is to it. He's been on like 4 or 5 times. We always go like 2 hours. It's ridiculous.
Man, I really do. I appreciate so much. I love getting to talk to you. I love getting to interact with you, even through like John's channel and stuff. I love watching all the little skits, and I do miss that, that those aren't there, but understand also. But yeah, it's just so cool to get to meet guys, brothers in particular, like you, that I can have confidence with and say, "Hey man, we both love the Lord, and we're in completely different states, and we love these nerdy books, and we can just enjoy them and you know, with no qualms whatsoever." So it's just been so much fun.
Yeah, no, same here. Thank your wife for giving you up for the evening.
I
Although, like,
absolutely will.
mine, I'm a talker too, so my wife's probably like, you go have your talk, and I get some peace and quiet for a couple hours. But yeah, not to be full of myself, but I will admit that I have occasionally gone back and watched Town Square,
Oh
and
yeah.
I just love watching how those guys react to the videos.
Yes.
It's hilarious.
So much fun. Such a good,
We're gonna talk them into doing that again.
Their dynamic is like, if it was just John or just Jacob, it probably wouldn't work.
Ted
Well, I
really
say
loved the 15 minutes he saw.
that, but man, with those two guys together, it's just, I mean, they figured it out. You know, it's like I could sit there and just listen to them just hang out. And so it's so cool. It's also so cool to see the father-son dynamic as a guy that's got a little boy. You know, that's what I hope for too, is to be able to still hang out with him, even if he doesn't live with us anymore.
Yeah, my kids are in their 20s, so
yeah, that's
I think they still live around here somewhere. All right. No, but appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep. Yeah, we'll catch you later, and maybe we'll hang out again sometime.
Awesome. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Josh.
See you.
Bye, everybody.